Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Sivan Raviv, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from across the region. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. Let's get into all of the latest developments of the last hour. A 48-hour deadline is ticking down toward a U.S. attack on Iran. Reports are indicating that the U.S. has given Iran a 48-hour deadline to submit a detailed nuclear proposal or risk the collapse of talks and a military attack. U.S. negotiators are set to meet Iranian officials in Geneva on Thursday and Friday, but only if Tehran delivers a plan Washington considers serious. President Donald Trump is reportedly holding a firm on a zero enrichment demand, while signaling limited flexibility if Iran can prove it has no pathway to a nuclear weapon. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi has confirmed he will attend the summit. Washington confirmed the talks as U.S. negotiator Steve Witkoff warned Iran could theoretically be just a week away from enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels, a claim that stresses the urgency. President Trump has reportedly told senior advisors he is prepared to escalate dramatically against Iran if diplomacy or even an initial U.S. strike fails to force Tehran to abandon its nuclear program. According to officials briefed on internal deliberations, Trump is considering a limited military strike in the coming days as well, designed to send a clear message to Iran's leaders that they must give up any capability to produce a nuclear weapon. Potential targets reportedly include the headquarters of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, key nuclear facilities, and elements of the ballistic missile program. But the president has also signaled something far larger. If initial action does not work, he may consider a much broader military campaign later this year, one aimed at weakening or even toppling Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. As U.S. and Iranian negotiators are set to meet in Geneva Thursday in what appears to be a last effort to avoid conflict, behind the scenes a possible compromise is being discussed, allowing Iran a strictly limited enrichment program for medical purposes only. 2 U.S. aircraft carrier groups and dozens of warplanes are now within striking distance of Iran as the White House weighs its next move. And fresh anti-regime protests have erupted for a second day on Iranian university campuses, with students openly defying the Islamic Republic and waving the banned flag of the ousted Shah. Demonstrations were reported at 5 universities in Tehran and 1 in Mashhad, centered around 40-day memorial services for the thousands killed in last month's brutal crackdown on nationwide unrest. Videos from Sharif University of Technology show large crowds chanting anti-government slogans, with some students holding the pre-revolution monarchy flag, a highly symbolic challenge to the Islamic Republic. The latest rallies come weeks after what activists describe as the deadliest crackdown of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's rule. And as Iran now braces for the possibility of war with the United States and Israel, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has quietly restructured the Islamic Republic's power structure, entrusting much of the country's day-to-day control to his longtime ally, Ali Larijani. Larijani, a former Revolutionary Guard commander and now head of the Supreme National Security Council, has effectively been running crisis management since January, sidelining President Pezeshkian, as Tehran faces anti-regime protests at home and the threat of the military attack by the United States. Khamenei has ordered layers of succession for key military and government posts, naming multiple backups in case of assassinations or communication breakdown during an attack. A new National Defense Council has been established, and Parliament Speaker Galibash has been designated to command armed forces in times of war. Security forces from the besieged militia are preparing for street deployments to suppress unrest if ordered. Khamenei strikes a defiant tone, warning that any attack would be met with a devastating response, but behind the scenes, Iran's leadership is clearly preparing not just for war, but for survival. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will arrive in Israel on Wednesday for a high-profile visit that includes an address to the Knesset, talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and a visit to Yad Vashem. Netanyahu confirmed the visit at the weekly cabinet meeting, describing India as a global power and calling Modi a personal friend. The two leaders are expected to focus on expanding cooperation in high-tech, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing, areas both countries see as strategic priorities. Modi responded on social media thanking Netanyahu and praising the relationship as one built on trust, innovation, and a shared commitment to peace and progress. Netanyahu said his broader vision is to build what he called a hexagon of allies across the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean, positioning India as a key partner in countering radical regional axis. Let's take a listen.
השבוע ניתן ביטוי ליחסים מיוחדים שנרקמו במהלך השנים האחרונות בין ישראל לבין המעצמה העולמית הודו וביני לבין העומד בראשה ראש הממשלה נרנדרה מודי. אנחנו ידידים אישיים, מדברים תכופות בטלפון, מבקרים זה את זה. מרקם היחסים הלך והתהדק והוא יבוא הנה כדי שנוכל להדק אותו עוד יותר בסדרה של החלטות שקשורות להידוק בשיתוף פעולה בין הממשלות, בין המדינות, שיתוף פעולה כלכלי, שיתוף פעולה מדיני ושיתוף פעולה ביטחוני.
תציג אותו. And with this 48-hour U.S. deadline ticking down and American carrier groups positioned within striking distance, tensions with Iran appear closer to confrontation than at any point before. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments is Professor Meir Litvak, head of the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv University, and Major in Reserves Elliot Chodov, political and military analyst. Thank you both for joining.
Good afternoon.
Elliot, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Thank you for joining us. So there is now a 48-hour deadline given to Iran to present the U.S. as an acceptable counter plan, or else. Do you believe this deadline to be real? We've heard threats before.
Everything is real, and at the same time, everything is not, especially with the current administration. Let's remember that this all began 6 weeks ago with President Trump telling the demonstrators, step it up, help is on the way, and it never arrived. The idea of 48-hour deadline sounds good, but unless an acceptable plan is presented, acceptable to whom? In other words, the decision to go ahead or not go ahead is a completely fluid one. If Witkoff says it's acceptable, then they continue negotiating. If he says it's not, then it's not. And what it actually says matters less than what the administration decides to do.
Do you believe that this is in Witkoff or the mediator's hands at this point?
It's in his hands in the sense that Trump relies on him. He trusts him. I believe that Witkoff was sent to make a deal. And personally, that's concerning to me because making a deal means giving in on points that perhaps in international strategy shouldn't be given in on. But ultimately, the decision is going to be Trump's. He's caught on the horns of a number of dilemmas as well, including his domestic base not supporting a military action against Iran. So where he's going to go and how he's going to decide is based really on his decision making. And as I said, will the Iranians will certainly present something. Whether it's acceptable or not is something that the Americans are going to decide.
Now, if Trump is demanding zero enrichment, is there any realistic path for Iran to agree to such a thing? Does diplomacy actually have a chance, in your opinion?
I don't believe the Iranians will agree to it. On the other hand, they can agree to it and then lie down the road. In other words, here again, there are layers of strategy. There are two U.S. aircraft carrier task forces, one here already, one on the verge of being here. If the Iranians come to some sort of an agreement and the Americans withdraw their forces, the Iranians can basically do whatever they want. Carrier task forces can't be turned around and brought back at will. Certainly not the Ford task force. The Ford needs to get back its longest deployment ever. So how much will the Iranians play a game? How much will they play brinksmanship? How much will they hope that they can get away with the window dressing? Again, these are decisions that are being made in Tehran. How much the Americans accept all of that are decisions made in Washington. Here, just to be clear, the reality, I think, has less impact than the decisions and perceptions for the leadership.
Now, Professor Meir Litvak, are you with us? I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Can you hear me, Meir?
Yes, there's a bad connection. I apologize, but I'm trying.
We'll give it a shot anyhow. So, Professor Litvak, what are your projections here? Is there a way back from all of these threats from the last few weeks, Trump's threats? Is there a real chance for diplomacy?
I think both sides, prefer a deal over confrontation. Of course, each demands a very significant price. It would lose a war, but it prefers confronting America, losing a battle, than making concessions, expose the regime's weakness, and then endanger it domestically. So
You're cutting out a little bit, Professor Litvak.
the Iranians losing a complete surrender to America.
So I wasn't sure that I was able to hear the full answer. Let's try just to get a few words. Do you believe that there's a chance for diplomacy?
I think there is a chance for diplomacy because I think both sides prefer a diplomatic deal over a war. Again, for the Iran regime, making a deal, going to war against the U.S.
I apologize. We are having some bad reception here. Professor Litvak, why don't you check your reception and let's try this in a few moments again. In the meantime, Elliot, can I continue with you? What could Iran actually agree to compromise on in a deal? Is there something that they could compromise on, in your opinion?
Honestly, they're not going to compromise, and they've been very clear. They on the issues of ballistic missiles, they're not even willing to discuss. On the issues of supporting Hezbollah, Houthis, and other terrorist organizations, proxies and otherwise, they're not willing to discuss. The nuclear issue is always up for discussion with them, as we've seen in the past, because it's eminently easy for them to cheat. They will not agree to zero. Again, unless it says total window dressing for a month. And I agree with Professor Litvak, they have to be very careful not to show weakness because they do have an opposition that's waiting to jump out there. We see that with the student demonstrations today on the 40th anniversary, the memorial to those who were killed. So they have to be seen as strong because if not, they can lose the regime. Realistically, they can agree to some sort of percentage of enrichment because we know once they go to a percentage, they can take it from one to another and they can do it secretly. They've done it in the past and they would do it in the future.
And so if these talks set for this week, if they collapse, what could we be looking at, do you think? A limited strike, something symbolic, or really an all-out war?
A symbolic strike is a waste of time and it's a waste of lives. The Iranians have made very clear, and I understand them. They're not going to back down simply by signaling. And I think that's been true all along. They have their strategic direction, they have their ideological, their religious direction and interests, and they're not going to compromise on them. So taking out a few targets in the sense of, okay, we hit you, we punished you a little bit, now behave yourselves, is simply not realistic. If we're talking about a full-scale operation, whether it's in phase one or after the failure of a limited operation, here I'm going to quote Winston Churchill, everybody knows how to start a war, nobody knows how to end one. To predict what happens after the immediate strike is folly, and I don't think it pays to go there.
Do you think that the U.S. has the ability to topple the regime? Is regime change militarily even achievable from the air?
No. Regime change has to come from the ground, and as we've learned, those of us in the business knew it even before the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, it has to come from within. Now, coming from within doesn't mean without the support of outsiders, but it has to be support. So once again, the opportunity was there, and there are no guarantees, obviously, but the opportunity was there 6 weeks ago. Had America struck then decisively, strategically, again, not symbolically, but hitting IRGC targets, communications, infrastructure, and the like, that might have weakened the regime enough for the demonstration/uprising to have made that shift. Here again, the students are demonstrating. They have not gone to violence. Could they go to violence with a weakened regime? Very possibly. In other words, that could set the stage for a true uprising. Ultimately, I have a basic rule, and we saw it in the last round, and that is that an uprising revolution succeeds when the rebels have more people willing to die than the regime is willing and able to kill. The regime is certainly willing to kill. What American air power can do is reduce its capability below the level of where they can kill more people than the rebels are willing to lose. Last but not least, a key in all of this is the military, not the IRGC, but the national military. They are not ideological, and typically in these kinds of situations, they will go with the side that they believe can win. And if they believe the rebels can win, it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that they can shift over, go to the rebels, and that could bring down the regime.
Now, if the U.S. strikes first, how likely is the regional escalation? Will Hezbollah join in, do you think? And do they even have the military capability at the moment, considering the past 2 years?
Hezbollah has a military capability nowhere near what it had a couple of years ago. But here, let's also keep in mind, for Hezbollah more than any other group, the survival of the Khomeiniist regime, the Islamic Republic, is critical, since Hezbollah is not a proxy of Iran, it is part of Iran. It's a subordinate of the Quds force of the IRGC. In other words, no Iran, and for all intents and purposes, there's no Hezbollah. This is not true for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, for example. They have other sources. So even if it's a suicide attempt or a suicide mission for them, in the sense that they don't have the capability, they're still going to try to do it. And of course, the IDF is preparing for that, knowing that it's a very real possibility. It's not so much a military strategic decision for Hezbollah, but rather a political strategic decision. They can't afford to let the regime in Iran go under because of the end of them as well.
Now, from Israel's perspective, is this the moment that Israel has been waiting for? Is a strike something that Israel wants, or could this spiral out of control for Israel?
Any war can spiral out of control, and a lot depends on the targeting, the skill of the American planners and its execution. Does Israel get involved or not? And again, these are the decisions that are made at the highest political levels. Do the Americans want Israeli support or not? Militarily, that would be helpful. Politically, not necessarily in the Middle East, and they have to balance that. If the Americans say stay out of it, then Israel will stay out of it, and unless Iranian strikes force an Israeli response. On the other hand, the Americans could say, you know what, you guys are really good at this. After we send the initial strikes, join in and coordinate. And these are things that again, are decided at the very, very highest levels. Will Iran attempt to hit Israel? In all probability, the answer is yes. How well can Israel and the American forces defend against that remains to be seen. That's one of the realities of war. You can estimate and you can guesstimate, but ultimately it's going to be tested on the battlefield.
I'm hearing that Netanyahu reportedly seems to be concerned. Does he have reason to be?
Concerned about what? About Iranian strikes?
About the possibility of a retaliation from Iran. Or perhaps about the fact that Trump may not strike after all.
Okay, so that was why I asked. In which direction are we going? Look, if the Americans leave the Iranians in power, essentially everything was done in the past year will ultimately be wasted. The Iranians will rebuild. It'll take them however long it does, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. In strategic terms, that's not very long. And we're right back at square one. So a fear of leaving the Iranians to their own devices is a real fear and a legitimate one. A fear of Iranian response retaliation against Israel is also real. And here again, we've seen that they have capability. We saw it the last time, not the capabilities that they said that they had. And of course, they played it up afterwards as if they had destroyed Tel Aviv in the process. And of course, we know that was nonsense. On the other hand, their ballistic missiles, some of them did get through. They caused damage. They caused casualties. And if they're pressed to the wall, casualties, lives, yes.
Yeah.
If they're pressed to the wall, every system, and this includes the American nuclear strategic arm, every system has some option in there called use them or lose them. If they see that they're being really pushed to the end, they will fire everything they've got because it serves them no purpose to save, for the future. Mm-hmm. And it could cause considerable damage here. Once again, an equation, an algebra that we have no way of calculating, is it worth it to see the end of the Islamic Republic? Mm-hmm. Once again, those are questions that can be debated in at this stage. Only after the reality and time will tell will we be able to say whether it was or it wasn't.
I have to say, by now, we would have thought that we'd be in a different place. After all of these weeks, all of the threats, I think Israelis are quite surprised by the stalling and the stagnation. Are you?
I'm not surprised. Trump is a master of chaos, and the threats are part of that, which is why he's unpredictable. And let's say this, in warfare, unpredictability has its value. In diplomacy, international relations, not so much. And we're all, the whole world is watching and saying, okay, what happens next? A few weeks ago, every 24 hours it was going to happen tonight. It was going to happen tonight. And now we're looking at a possibility that may not happen in the next week or 10 days. He said 10 days, then he said 48 hours. Maybe the next one will be 3 weeks. And there's just no way of telling with him.
Right, certainly. That's why I began my questions by asking, is this 48-hour deadline, is it for real? Now, let me ask you one more question. Is it possible that the Americans will strike and Israel will not be involved? Is that a possibility at all?
It's a possibility. I can think of two possibilities or two options on that. One is the Americans say we want to do it ourselves, stay out of it. And with that, the Iranian retaliation against Israel is not terribly damaging or devastating, or not at all. It's all stopped or intercepted by the Americans and by Israeli air defenses, in which case Israel can essentially sit it out, similar to the Gulf War when the Scuds were falling here in 1991 and the Americans said, stay out of it, we don't want you involved. If it goes beyond a certain point, Israel will have no choice. In other words, here we're not talking about, and I lived through the Gulf War here as well, we're not talking about an occasional Scud coming over in the course of a couple of months. The Iranians have a capability, as we said before, of doing real damage, and that's not something Israel is going to be able to sit out. So that here again, there's a balance of we'll have to wait and see. There could very well be a case of Israel not getting involved, but that can also turn over overnight. And once again, war being unpredictable.
Have to wait and see. Let's address for a moment what's happening inside Iran right now. So you've mentioned the protests from several weeks ago. We are now seeing fresh protests on university campuses with students waving the banned pre-revolution flag. Are these protests significant, do you think? Is there a chance they'll escalate and that there will be another chance to what you mentioned earlier, another chance?
I don't think they're going to escalate on their own. I think that what's happening on the campuses now is that they're pushing the envelope. They've been told you'll be permitted to demonstrate, and the flags and that sort of thing are the edge of the envelope. but they've also been told, if you turn violent, we will respond with the violence that you saw 6 weeks ago. I think that here again, we're at one of those tipping point moments. If the Americans strike while the demonstrations are going on and weaken the IRGC sufficiently so that the students believe they can ratchet it up, then we might see another uprising happening now. These demonstrations, I don't believe, are going to go on for very long. In other words, they'll go another day or two, but if they don't step it up, they'll begin to fade away. I don't think they're going to do it on their own.
In your opinion, are we at a genuine turning point, or is this just another cycle as we've seen in recent weeks?
As I said, they've learned a lesson. Pick your number, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 killed by the regime. And they have been informed reliably that what they saw the last time, they will see again, maybe even worse. So I don't think we're at a tipping point or at a critical point from within alone. I think that they will need some sort of accelerant, which would be an American strike, for example, while these protests are still hot. And how long that will be is unpredictable. This isn't an organized uprising with commanders. This is spontaneous, which has its value, but it also has its unpredictability. It can run a day, 2, 3, 5, and at any point along there, it can begin to dissipate. If the regime uses skilled anti-demonstration, anti-riot forces, as opposed to opening fire on them indiscriminately, they can also break it up. It's a tricky business, and once again, these are things that can go either way, which is why the first time around the regime let it go on for a while before they turned their weapons on them. There are no clear-cut formulas, so possible, but as I said, unlikely, in my opinion, that they will spontaneously erupt to the level that they were. They'll need some sort of an igniter, an accelerant, and that would be an American strike.
Well, Elliot Chodov, thank you very much for all of your input today.
My pleasure.
And finally, and on a different note, the National Religious Broadcasters is bringing its first ever Jerusalem Media Summit to Israel this November, marking a historic moment in the organization's 80-year history. In partnership with the government press office and I Travel Jerusalem, the summit will unite Christian and Jewish media leaders in a shared effort to push back against misinformation and rising hatred. The gathering comes on the heels of NRB's 2026 convention in Nashville and follows a solidarity mission led by CEO Troy Miller, underscoring a deepening commitment to Israel and to cooperation between faith communities. Set for November 1st through the 5th, the summit will bring journalists, communicators, influencers, and church leaders to the capital to confront the global surge of anti-Semitism and anti-Christian sentiment and to strengthen collaboration in what many describe as an ongoing information war after 2 years of conflict. Let's take a look.
NRB is proud to announce that we will be hosting the NRB Jerusalem Media Summit this fall, November 1st through the 5th. We will be convening Christian media professionals, communicators, church leaders from around the world so that together we can fight hatred.
After the announcement was made, Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon delivered a digital message. Let's take a listen.
Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and it is a spiritual capital of millions of believers across the globe, a city that lives in all our hearts. I hope you have time while you get here to see the city, to meet the people, to visit the holy sites, taste the flavors, and enjoy the blessings of Jerusalem.
And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel, breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Kalev Ben-David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. The U.S. and Iran hold a second round of talks in Geneva with reports of some progress, but no breakthrough to a nuclear deal. This as Iran stages a major military naval exercise in the Straits of Hormuz, and the U.S. continues its buildup with the deployment of 50 more fighter jets to the region. President Trump will convene the first working meeting of his Board of Peace in Washington on February 19th, saying the world leaders who attend will have already pledged $5 billion for the reconstruction of Gaza. Amid ongoing operations in Gaza, the IDF identifies and eliminates 6 terrorists in the Rafah area, and it covers a large arms cache, including RPG rockets intended for use against Israeli forces in the Strip. The IDF's 91st Division eliminates 4 terrorists involved in attempting to rebuild Hezbollah's military infrastructure in South Lebanon, as Hezbollah rejects the Lebanese government's latest plan to disarm the terror group in accordance with its ceasefire agreement with Israel. Israel Aerospace Industries says the new Arrow 4 system is likely to be deployed in the coming months, boosting Israel's air defense capabilities, including its ability to intercept hypersonic ballistic missiles. And now our big story. U.S. negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Geneva Wednesday for the second round of talks mediated by Oman to reach an agreement on Tehran's nuclear program and possibly other issues. Araghchi said there was some progress and guiding principles were agreed on, but U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance sounded more downbeat, asserting Iran has yet to agree to the red line set out by President Trump. Meanwhile, the military buildup between the countries continues, with Iran staging naval drills in the Straits of Hormuz and the U.S. deploying dozens more fighter jets in the region. Here's Trump and Araghchi on the talks.
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. But typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
A new window of opportunity has opened, under which we had the second round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region. At the same time, as demonstrated during the aggression of 13 June 2025, Iran remains fully prepared to defend itself against any threat or act of aggression. The consequences of any attack against Iran will not be confined to its borders.
Well, joining us now is Ambassador Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. He's also a former deputy minister and member of Knesset. Ambassador Oren, thank you for joining us. Michael, just in the last few hours before we're speaking, there have been reports suggesting the talks are failing and the U.S. attack could come even sooner than many anticipated, even in the next few days. I mean, what are your feelings about that?
Well, good to be with you, Kalev. Always good to be here. Of course they're failing. There was never really much of a chance that they were going to succeed. The United States came to the talks with 3 major demands: that Iran dismantles its nuclear program, ceases to enrich uranium, that Iran dismantles the plants that are making ballistic missiles that can strike Israel with tremendous warheads, and that Iran cease its support for terror across the Middle East and the world. And if Iran were to give up on these 3 demands, the Iranian regime would not be the Iranian regime anymore. This is their DNA. This is who they are. So there was never much of a chance that they could agree, even on the question of the so-called right to enrich, which the Iranians arrogate to themselves. And having said that, then the question is, okay, when does this take place? When is there what they call a kinetic action, military action take place? Under what circumstances? What are the goals? And what is the aftermath? What does the day after look like? The immediate problem the United States has is building up sufficient forces in the Middle East, a critical mass. Before they had 1 aircraft carrier. on an aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, there are 90 planes. 70 of them are warplanes. 70 warplanes to cover an area which is larger than France and Germany combined, with a population, Iranian population of 90 million. It's not much. It's a pinprick.
Right.
So they had to bring in many more planes, as they have now, 50 more warplanes. Another aircraft carrier scheduled to arrive in maybe the coming days, maybe the coming weeks. It takes a long time to get an aircraft carrier from Norfolk, Virginia to the Persian Gulf. And also the strategic bombers that are in the area. I mean, in theory, a strategic bomber can take off from Idaho and reach Iran within about 20 hours. That's easy.
Right, which we saw last June.
Sure. And so they can. But you have to bring a critical mass. And then the big question, the immediate question after that is, what can the Iranians do to these forces? And here, I'm a military historian by profession, and I'm a little bit older than you, believe it or not. And I'm going to give you two historical cautionary notes that I think the Americans remember very well. One was the bombing of the USS Cole in the year 2000 in the port of Aden. It was struck by a suicide speedboat. And caused tremendous damage. Iran probably has innumerable speedboats like this. The Houthis certainly have them. The Houthis love martyrdom. The Syrian militias, the Iraqi militias that are backed by Iran. That's one. Then there's the missiles. Iran has thousands of drones, missiles, ground-to-sea missiles. And the other cautionary note goes back a little bit further to 1982, the Falklands War. Where the Argentinians fired a French-made Exocet missile at the largest British destroyer, the Sheffield, and basically knocked it out and killed a great number of British soldiers. So all you need is one of these rockets to get through. All you need is one of the drones to get through. And so the United States has to truly build up its anti-missile, anti-drone capabilities in this area in order to go to war.
Right. Now, you said the talks are clearly failing. But the Iranian foreign minister certainly doesn't give that impression.
Of course he doesn't.
Is he just misreading the situation, or is he dissembling, and to what purpose?
Here's the purpose. He knows that an American military operation against Iran does not have a tremendous amount of support within the American public. I think that's probably an overstatement, by the way. Has very little support, and almost negligible. With the Democrats, none. But even within the Republican Party, even within the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, people have said, wait a minute, Mr. President, you promised us during the election that you were going to focus on America first. What's with this Venezuela? What's with the Ukraine? What's with Gaza? And now Iran? We can't even find Iran on a map. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking the lives of American soldiers? J.D. Vance said several days ago, he may have changed his message since then, was that, if the Iranian people want to overthrow their government, that's their business. It's not our business. We just don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So what the Iranian foreign minister is doing, and he's saying to the American public, look, everything's going great. We're having terrific negotiations. There's no reason to go to war right now. And so it makes the administration's PR problem a little bit more difficult. There's also in the background, there are the midterm elections coming up. And even in the Wall Street Journal today, talked about the very grave difficulties that the Republicans are going to have to retain the House of Representatives. If they lose it, in terms of legislation, it turns the administration into a lame duck for the remainder of its term in office. It cannot advance domestic legislation. And so if people are dissatisfied, disaffected with the fact that the president is not focusing on domestic issues, but focusing on Iran, much less losing American service people in a battle with Iran, that could definitely impact the outcome of those elections.
Right. Now, you said one of the questions remaining is what would be the goal of a U.S. military operation. Last June, it was clear, knocking out the nuclear program. What would be the goal if the U.S. goes to a military operation in this case? Is it regime change? Is it just teaching Iran a lesson?
I don't think any amount of military action can bring down a regime. I don't care if you knock out all their bases. You're talking about a regime that has somewhere more than 500,000 men under arms just in the IRGC. The Revolutionary Guards. It has 500,000 men under arms in the Army, and between 2 and 5 million members of the Besieged. This is this paramilitary group that beats people over the head if they go out and demonstrate. It's a very powerful regime, very deep-seated. The only way that the regime falls, I believe, would be simultaneously with the American military action or Israeli military action, which I think we should talk about, the people go out to the street again. And they bring down that regime. Then the question is going to, okay, what's the next government going to look like? Could it be an element in the IRGC that takes over? And they may conclude, gee, if we had had a nuclear weapon, this wouldn't have happened. We better run ahead and get a nuclear weapon. Or is it the Shah's son moving from Long Island to Tehran?
Right.
And we know him very well and respect him, and he seems to have a certain degree of support, certainly outside of Iran, with Iranian expatriates.
Right.
But within Iran, we don't know. There are questions. There are certainly questions that loom.
Right. So you talked about Israeli military action. Last June, it was the U.S. joining up with Israel. What would be the situation for Israel here? Would Israel join immediately, wait for Iran to strike? And again, what would we know what Israel wants to achieve is, would that even be achievable with its military?
I think we have to avoid at all costs a situation where we're perceived as striking first and dragging America into war.
Right.
I've just come back to the United States. American Jews are very concerned about this. A tremendous amount of anti-Semitism with the claim that Jews drag America into war that they don't need in the Middle East, unnecessary wars. So, certainly, Israel has much skin in the game, and the same questions that maybe plague a number of Americans do not plague us. For us, the devil we know is worse than the devil we don't know.
Right.
We'd probably take any regime over the current regime.
Right.
And we have that additional strategic threat of the Iranian ballistic missiles,
Right.
which are a serious strategic threat. If Iran can continue to produce these missiles at the speed at which they're doing it now, they, by the end of the year, could have 3,000 missiles.
Right.
One of these missiles can take down not a building, but a neighborhood.
Right.
And it's certainly an unacceptable threat to the state of Israel. So we'd have to act anyway. My assumption would be that Iran will fire at us, and we'll be in what I call a Dirty Harry situation. If you remember the movie where Dirty Harry says, "Go ahead, pull the trigger, make my day.
Make my day.
Make my day. Make our day." And I mentioned there were 90 of these planes on an aircraft carrier. The number of actual warplanes that the Israeli Air Force has is classified, but let's say it's something other than 200.
Okay.
And that is already a massive force. And we also have naval assets, which didn't play a huge role in the last war. They could play a significant role in this war.
Right. And I do want to ask you, there were the reports, the Fars agency of Iran announced that there will be a joint Iranian-Russian military exercise in the Gulf of Oman, the Indian Sea. What are the dangers of Iran trying to basically choke off the Gulf and impact on the delivery of oil and natural gas?
Again, I'm sorry for doing this. Dirty Harry.
Okay.
Make my day. What do they have? They do not have large naval vessels. They have basically missile boats, which can be taken out. And I'd like to see them try to close the Straits of Hormuz. I think that there are many people in the U.S. Navy would welcome that opportunity to try out their ship-to-ship ordnance. And I don't think they have the capability. What they do have the capability of doing is, first of all, firing missiles at, say, Saudi refineries, Emirati refineries, even at American bases in the Middle East. There are 40,000 American soldiers deployed in the Middle East. They'll certainly be targets, dragging Israel in. And I think the biggest target for the Iranians will be one of these very large American warships, certainly an aircraft carrier. They're going to be pummeled. I know that the difficulties the U.S. Navy had in fighting the Houthis.
Right.
Fighting just the Houthis.
Right.
And they lost 3 airplanes off one of these aircraft carriers because they had to maneuver around and around so fast to dodge the missiles. That's just the Houthis. Imagine the Iranians.
All right. So certainly we're looking at a more serious operation, war even, let's say, than last June. Lasting a couple of weeks, maybe even more than that.
We don't know. We don't know how strong that first strike will be.
Right.
If the first strike can really be a knockout.
Right.
Okay. But I want to add with sort of a controversial notion is that I raised some eyebrows last summer on Israeli television by everyone was sort of doing victory laps, how much we had beaten the Iranians. I said, wait a minute, are we certain that the Iranians don't think they won this war?
Right.
That they stood up for 12 days against the biggest superpower in the world. They survived. They fired a few missiles at Qatar and Trump backed down. They may conclude that they can withstand this.
Right.
They'll lose a few bases. They'll lose a few leaders. At the end of the day, all they have to do, it's like Hamas, all they have to do is win, is not lose.
All right. And again, make my day. That seems to be their threat they're putting to the U.S. And Israel. Ambassador Oren, stay with us. I want to move to another issue. The U.S. is pushing ahead with the second phase of its peace plans for Gaza, with the convening in Washington, D.C. of world leaders and officials set to fund and oversee the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. President Trump says those nations have already pledged some $5 billion for the task, although much more will be needed. And Indonesia has become the first country to agree to provide armed forces for an international stabilization force. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will attend the summit despite Israel's objections to the inclusion of Qatar and Turkey. Meanwhile, Hamas terrorists continue to attack IDF forces in Gaza, and the big question remains whether the terror group will disarm as per the agreement and who will oversee that process. Michael, you veteran diplomat in Washington, Gideon Saar is going there. There was a lot of discussion about whether Israel should even be represented there at the conference. What do you think he'll say? What do you think he should say? What advice do you have for the?
Well, I don't think it needs my advice. I think he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think Israel should be represented there, and I think it'll be well represented with Foreign Minister Saar. I think the major issue is the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, the dismantling the Hamas military capabilities, disarming them. Without that happening, I don't see how this is going to work. I really don't. You can get the Indonesian troops in there, but what exactly are they going to do? They have said, very succinctly that they will not fight Hamas. Okay, so who is going to fight Hamas? Are they just going to serve as a shield for Hamas? We're going to have to fire over the heads of these Indonesians. Hopefully, don't hit any of them, and the Hamas will simply use them. They'll hide behind them. So I don't see where we move from here other than that. The danger would be that someone may think, okay, we'll just get Hamas to put their guns in, say, a warehouse with a key.
Or putting their so-called heavy weapons, but letting them have firearms.
Right.
That is the danger that Israel is concerned. How realistic is that, and how should Israel deal with that without, in a way, going publicly against President Trump and his big plans?
It's not easy. That's the hard thing. Up to this point, we have not said to President Trump really no to anything. Not easy to say no to this president. We may have to say thank you, but I think Israel has to have a red line. I think there is a line. Those small arms were the arms that killed most of the people on October 7th. With those small arms are AK-47s, and they are deadly and extreme. And we cannot. That is the principle of the 20 points. We accept the 20 points on the basis of that as the assumption that that Hamas would be disarmed. And if that doesn't happen, then the status quo will continue.
Until when? Because, again, we just discussed Iran, the fact that this is an ongoing situation that could last weeks or months. At what point does Israel, should it be ready to press the administration, say, enough time has passed, we need to go in and finish the job with Hamas?
We may do that during the course of the war. I would assume that we're going to act very, very strongly in southern Lebanon to complete the mission of driving Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon.
If Hezbollah attacks Israel as part of
even if it doesn't.
Really?
Even if it doesn't, we'll take advantage of that opportunity. And there we have far less disagreements with the Trump administration. With Gaza, we may also have to avail ourselves of that opportunity to move in there. The status quo that exists, and here again I may ruffle a few feathers, is not the worst outcome for the state of Israel. Hamas went to war against us on October 7th. The Palestinians went to war against us, and when you go to war, you risk losing land. The IDF now holds 53% of Gaza. We could hold those 53% in perpetuity until such a time as maybe there's a peace treaty, and that would be the price they pay. Obviously, Hamas does not care about how many.
But there is a price the IDF is paying, because there are soldiers being injured, and there are fatalities on the Israeli side just from these skirmishes along the yellow line.
Certainly, and we have to respond very, very forcefully to each and every one of them. But to let Hamas sit in the debris of the part of Gaza that they hold, to receive virtually no foreign assistance in the terms of actual money, no arms, is a better outcome than having a situation where there's an international force there that will serve as a shield for Hamas and not disarm Hamas. That for Israel would be the worst case scenario.
Well, it does seem this force is moving ahead. Indonesia, first country to publicly commit itself to providing troops for that force. This is a country that Israel has no diplomatic relations with, even though there have been, of course, rumors for years about secret contacts. How comfortable should be, under any circumstances, for these foreign troops would be unprecedented to be, for example, moving into any part of the Gaza Strip?
It's good for our relationship with Indonesia. And you're true, we have had many contacts with Indonesia. They're not considered an enemy country. But what are they going to do?
Right.
What are they going to do? They have said they will not fight Hamas. If that's the case, And I have grave concern in general about the Western position about Gaza. There's a plan to build these very nice communities that resettle the people who have been displaced, and they'll have schools, and they'll have clinics, and they'll have sewage, and they'll have medical care, and it'll all be very, very beautiful. But if you do not change the education system, if you don't begin to educate a generation, and it will take 20 years. If you don't educate them that peace is the goal, that killing women and children and raping and beheading children is not the goal, then simply you're going to have very, very nice neighborhoods with Hamas in them. And very soon, by the way. And it requires patience. It requires patience and a fundamental understanding of how societies in this area of the world work.
Right. Well, that is actually going to be, that would, as you said, would be a long process, and it is going to, as you say, require much patience moving forward. We'll have to see if the Trump administration has that patience. We know President Trump likes to see quick results.
And as do people in Israel. Remember the Peace Now movement?
Right.
They wanted peace now. This is peace maybe in 20 years.
All right. Well, we'll have to see, even in the next few months, if any progress is made toward any of those goals. Ambassador and Dr. Michael Oren, thank you for joining us here on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. Last week, the IDF, responding to a petition filed under Israel's Freedom of Information Act by the group Hatzlacha, published for the first time the exact numbers of soldiers serving in the military while holding foreign citizenship. The information revealed that 50,632 soldiers hold foreign citizenship in addition to that of Israel, with over 12,000 from the U.S., some 6,000 from France, and 5,000 from Russia. Now, this story attracted little media notice here in Israel, but it generated headlines in foreign media that are hostile to Israel, such as Qatar's Al Jazeera and Iran's Press TV. Now, it is not illegal or problematic for immigrants from most countries to serve in the IDF while still retaining their original citizenship. But since the October 7th war began, various groups and websites, including Zionist Watch, Canada's The Maple, and the Hind Rajab Foundation, have targeted Israeli soldiers by doxing them. That is, publicizing their private personal details with the purpose of intimidation or harassment by activists, or exposing them to possible legal action in other countries. There have been several incidents in recent years when Israelis who have served in Gaza were doxed by these organizations while traveling abroad, leading them to have to quickly and surreptitiously return home to Israel from visits to such countries as Belgium and Brazil. Now, especially vulnerable to this kind of threat are those Israeli soldiers or veterans who hold foreign citizenship and still maintain strong connections to their countries of origin. The danger is especially acute for immigrants from such nations as South Africa, which has officially accused Israel of genocide, and where pro-Palestinian groups are urging the government to identify and prosecute South African Jews who have served in the IDF. The Israeli government and defense establishment have started to recognize the extent of this problem. And last year, the IDF belatedly forbade its soldiers from putting on social media any photos or posts that identify them doing military service, unless, of course, they have official permission to do so. Still, more can and must be done. Most Western countries, in particularly EU nations and the United States, have strict laws forbidding the publication of another individual's personal details. But the enforcement of these laws often tends to be more lax, especially in such countries as the UK and Canada, where pro-Palestinian activists have been active in doxing and then harassing both visiting Israelis and their own citizens who have served in the IDF. Official Israeli bodies such as the Foreign Ministry must be more vigorous in lobbying for these foreign governments to demonstrate greater vigilance in enforcing their own laws against doxing and harassment, while supporting Israeli and Jewish NGOs that are willing and able to provide the moral support and legal assistance which may be required in such cases. Now, it may be that I feel a strong personal connection to this matter as a dual Israeli-American citizen who once served in the IDF. But it is an issue every Israeli who supports the IDF should be aware about and invested in. This generation of soldiers who have already sacrificed so much on the battlefields in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, the Northern Front and elsewhere, and especially those who have left their birthplaces behind to come and serve the Jewish state in an IDF uniform, deserve better than to find themselves potentially facing another battle every time they step outside the borders of Israel. Thank you for joining ILTV Security Brief. As Tel Aviv keeps attracting a growing number of Olim from North America and Canada, a community fair held at the end of January brought newcomers together to access essential resources, build connections, and facilitate their integration into one of Israel's most vibrant cities. Let's take a look.
Tel Aviv is a city known for its dynamic rhythm, diversity, and wide range of opportunities. But for new immigrants who come to start fresh, integrating into the city's fast-paced lifestyle can be a challenge. This is where Nefesh B'Nefesh comes to help. On January 28th, Nefesh B'Nefesh welcomed over 300 Olim to its Tel Aviv center in partnership with the Jewish National Fund USA and the Azrieli Tower for the event Meet Tel Aviv, a community fair for Olim in Tel Aviv. For one evening, their center became a vibrant, welcoming meeting place where newcomers were given the opportunity to exchange stories, ask questions, and connect with organizations offering support in every stage of integration.
Tonight we have the Meet Tel Aviv, a community fair for Olim living in Tel Aviv. We have over 20 organizations represented here tonight. We have synagogues, we have sports organizations, we have the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, we have the Tel Aviv Municipality. Everyone is here with the goal of helping Olim find their people, find ways to meet other people, find activities and things to do so they can really stay in Israel and find their footing.
Tel Aviv remains to be one of the most popular destinations for Olim from North America. Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, the Jewish Agency for Israel, Keren Kayemet L'Israel, and Jewish National Fund USA, continues to strengthen the networks that help new immigrants transform a new city into a home.
Nefesh acts as this amazing hub, not just for Anglos, but for even locals here who want to get involved with the Olim and immigrant community. So these type of evenings and organizations are really, really important to not just the vitality of Israel, but the vitality of the immigrant community as a whole.
Events like the Meet Tel Aviv serve as a bridge for newcomers, giving them the opportunity to connect with other Olim who have the same struggles, gain access to essential services, and develop the social and professional networks necessary for a seamless transition.
Our mission is to help women that came from all over the world to Israel, Zionists, to integrate into Israel, to make business connections, to get new jobs, to meet friends, to just have a wonderful life in Israel.
The past years have brought a steady increase in North American Aliyah to the city, which highlights the importance of gatherings like this community fair. As these numbers keep rising, events like this play a key role in helping newcomers navigate their transition and build lasting connections in Israel.
I came here looking for a community, and it's incredible how many resources there are for Olim who are looking to find that community. I've been really fortunate to kind of build my own community through just random opportunities there are throughout Tel Aviv, and organizations and events like this is just one of the many ways to be able to connect with people.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Here are the latest developments. A deadline for a strike on Iran has been given. According to a report by Axios, the United States has set a 48-hour deadline for the Islamic regime in Iran to present a detailed nuclear proposal or risk the collapse of talks. Should the regime submit a proposal, talks between Iranian and American negotiators will continue in Geneva. But if not, the American armada in the region is poised and ready to strike. Washington is still seeking a zero enrichment policy, although reports are now suggesting that a possible compromise is being discussed, allowing Iran a strictly limited enrichment program for medical purposes only. In Tehran, the Islamic regime is preparing for an imminent escalation. Ayatollah Khamenei has been quietly restructuring the Islamic Republic's capabilities and position in the country, with the regime's head of Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani now entrusted with much of the country's day-to-day control. Successors for key military and government roles have also been named, this to cover all bases in the case of assassination. Larijani, a former IRGC commander, has effectively been running crisis management since January, sidelining President Pezeshkian as Tehran faces anti-regime protests at home and a growing threat of an American attack. Larijani is also expected to be the Iranian official presenting Washington with the regime's proposal for a deal in what appears to be the last effort to avoid a widespread regional conflict. And meanwhile, university campuses across Iran are seeing a second day of mass protests and mourning. Demonstrations were reported at 5 universities in Tehran and 1 in Mashhad, with most centered around 40-day memorial services for the thousands that have been killed in last month's brutal crackdown on nationwide unrest. Students were seen openly defying the Islamic Republic and waving the banned flag of the Shah, that's Reza Pahlavi, exemplifying immense bravery and strength. And meanwhile, as the Islamic regime prepares for a strike, here in Israel, preparations are underway to accept Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Modi is expected to land in Israel on Wednesday for a high-profile visit that includes an address to the Knesset, talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and a visit to Yad Vashem, Israel's National Holocaust Museum. The announcement was delivered at the weekly cabinet meeting by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Take a listen.
השבוע ניתן ביטוי ליחסים מיוחדים שנרקמו במהלך השנים האחרונות בין ישראל לבין המעצמה העולמית הודו וביני לבין העומד בראשה ראש הממשלה נרנדרה מודי. אנחנו ידידים אישיים, מדברים תכופות בטלפון, מבקרים זה את זה. מרקם היחסים הלך והתהדק והוא יבוא הנה כדי שנוכל להדק אותו עוד יותר בסדרה של החלטות שקשורות להידוק בשיתוף פעולה בין הממשלות, בין המדינות, שיתוף פעולה כלכלי, שיתוף פעולה מדיני ושיתוף פעולה ביטחוני.
The two leaders are expected to focus on expanding cooperation in various fields, including high-tech, even artificial intelligence, and quantum computing, areas that both countries see as strategic priorities. Modi responded on social media thanking Netanyahu and praising the relationship as one built on trust, innovation, and a shared commitment to peace and to progress. Netanyahu said his broader vision is to build what he called a, quote, hexagon of allies across the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean, positioning India as a key partner in the countering of radical regional axes. And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. That's breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate straight to your mobile phone. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen now to join our WhatsApp channel and get more updates coming out of Israel. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel in the heart of the Middle East. I'm Diva Klein, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast. President Trump amps up pressure on the Islamic Republic as strike appears imminent. IRGC takes over proxy terror group Hezbollah as IDF strikes the group's terror operatives in Lebanon. 80,000 Muslim worshippers peacefully celebrate Ramadan in Jerusalem over the weekend. U.S. President Donald Trump is openly signaling that military action against Iran could be imminent. Asked whether he's considering a limited strike to pressure Tehran into accepting a nuclear deal on Washington's terms, Trump said they better negotiate. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff says Trump is curious as to why Iran has not yet agreed to capitulate. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
They better negotiate a fair deal. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very, very sad situation.
He's, I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do, and yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
The latest remarks by President Trump and his negotiator, Steve Witkoff, came with the U.S. military presence in the region ready to carry out its orders. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has entered the Mediterranean with its strike group moving east after crossing the Strait of Gibraltar. U.S. Air Force strategic airlifters have also been deployed to Europe, signaling advance readiness to strike should diplomacy fail. Options reportedly include targeting Iranian military leaders, striking nuclear and security facilities, and even contingency plans that could aim at regime change, though officials stress no final decision has been made. Diplomacy continues. Iran's foreign minister says a written nuclear counterproposal could be ready within days and insists the U.S. has not demanded zero uranium enrichment. Tehran says it's prepared for confidence-building measures to prove its program is peaceful, but not more.
در مقابل هیچ کدوم از این سختی‌ها سرخم نخواهیم کرد. گیرم که دنیا با ناجوانمردی قدرت‌ها ایستادن تا ما رو مجبور کنن که در مقابلشون سرخم بکنیم. همان گونه که شما در مقابل سختی‌ها سرخم نکردید، ما نیز در مقابل این مشکلات سرخم نخواهیم کرد.
2 rounds of Iran-U.S. talks have stalled over uranium enrichment, missiles, and sanctions relief. According to sources familiar with the discussions, when Omani mediators delivered an envelope containing U.S. missile-related proposals, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi refused to open it and returned it. Israeli officials believe Tehran and Washington are at an impasse, with preparations near complete for a possible joint military action with the United States and all of the implications that would entail.
Anti-regime demonstrations erupted on campuses across Iran at the start of the new semester as momentum continues inside Iran against the brutal regime. Over the weekend, protests were held at major campuses, including Sharif University of Technology, Amir Kabir, Beheshti University in Tehran, and Mashhad University, protesting against the Islamic Republic and chanting anti-government slogans such as "Death to Khamenei." These rallies coincided with the new semester and mourning ceremonies held about 40 days after last month's deadly nationwide crackdown. The demonstrations continued this morning, according to the latest reports. At Tehran's Beheshti University, students staged a sit-in to honor those killed in last month's crackdown and to show support for imprisoned classmates. At Amir Kabir University of Technology, video shows demonstrators chanting "Long Live the King," a reference to Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is widely supported as Iran's transitional leader. The student union says security forces later blocked exits and detained participants. Today, Basij forces entered some of the campuses to detain organizers. Clashes were also reported at Sharif University, where footage appears to show members of the Basij militia confronting protesters. In Mashhad, students at the University of Medical Sciences were also heard chanting death to the dictator. Protests have not been limited to universities, however, as footage has surfaced throughout the last week of large gatherings of mourners chanting in protest against the regime and for the fall of the Islamic Republic. Meanwhile, arrests and executions of protesters is continuing, despite the regime's talks with the United States. Now, with us to discuss these U.S. negotiations with the Islamic regime in Iran is Norman Rolls, senior advisor at United Against a Nuclear Iran. Norman, it's always great to have you with us here again. There's a lot of talk right now about the Islamic Republic potentially capitulating on their nuclear program. How likely do you think that is to happen?
Good afternoon. The Islamic Republic's approach to negotiations has remained consistent. They are attempting to offer a partial solution on their nuclear program, which will allow them to retain the capacity to enrich domestically, which of course means they would retain the capacity to build a nuclear weapon at some time in the future, should they decide to do so. The Trump administration is willing to perhaps allow them some symbolic enrichment capacity. We've seen some reporting on this, but that would be scientifically designed to leave them with no technical capability to enrich, and I don't think that would satisfy them. I don't see the negotiations having been profitable to date for either side. The likelihood of military action remains high.
Well, in the event that some kind of a deal is actually made, would that actually prevent a war or military action? I mean, if you remember, we're not just talking, of course, about the nuclear program from the U.S. demands. We're also talking about that ballistic missile program.
That is correct. And the missile program has not been sufficiently discussed in the media. The Iranian missile program has technologically advanced over recent years. The nature of their warhead development is increasingly sophisticated, allowing them warheads which can be independently targeted, multiple warheads, MIRVs and MARVs as they're known. This needs to be constrained. The development of their space launch vehicle system, a civilian program, looks suspiciously like an ICBM program, which would be capable of attacking Western Europe as well as the United States. That's got to be constrained. The Trump administration is correct. They need to do something about that. And it's an imperative that any administration needs to face. And of course, the Quds force has not gone away, and they're going to attempt to rebuild proxies or create new proxies in the region, which will take several years. So it is appropriate to address that at this time. And if we fail to do so, then in several years we'll be facing the results of our attempt of our not dealing with this problem.
Well, if we do see the U.S. take military action, how wide scale would you expect the campaign to be? And would it possibly actually sink this regime?
The nature of the U.S. military elements in the region are robust. They are historic and provide the president with a vast amount of local and long-distance air and missile capacity, which would allow him, to the extent that he chooses to use that capacity, to conduct a strategic destruction of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, its remaining nuclear program, its missile program, and leadership elements in country. Now, again, he's got to decide the extent to which he wishes to use this. And then there is a day after. Once you've conducted this destruction, what's left? And just because you've destroyed the leadership, you still have thousands of armed Revolutionary Guard personnel. So you have a volatile situation with hardliners with weapons. We don't want to see a civil war or chaos. So that's got to be managed. So Washington will want to make sure that there's not chaos for the region. So that's the conversation I think that's taking place with U.S. leaders at present.
Now, what kind of opposition is President Trump facing at home regarding strikes on Iran? I mean, we've seen a tremendous amount of support from many Americans who see this threat. But at the same time, the Islamic Republic and its lobbyists are pushing very hard to spread fear about the concept of regime change in Washington.
Well, that's correct, and this is not new. Indeed, we saw something similar in 2012 and 13 prior to the Iran nuclear deal that developed at that time, that a conflict would spread to the entire region, that a conflict would disrupt global energy prices, that a conflict would leave many Americans dead, a conflict would kill many Israelis. There were many excuses to push back in a conflict, as well as congressmen who claimed that this would violate congressional authorities because of Congress's role in authorizing military action. So there are many reasons that people are attempting to oppose this. But what you're not hearing with these voices is what happens if nothing is done. Kicking the can down the road means only that the can gets heavier with each kick and the road gets shorter. And because we have done nothing against Iran's nuclear missile and Quds Force program, we're now stuck with a 900-pound can in a cul-de-sac. Somebody has got to deal with these issues at some point.
All right, well, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us today. As always, Norman Roll.
When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Well, amid ongoing tensions with the Islamic Republic, the IDF says it remains on high alert, but it isn't changing instructions to the Israeli public. IDF spokesman Brigadier General Effie Defrin said the military is closely monitoring regional developments and is on high alert in defense, adding that our eyes are open in all directions and our finger is on the trigger more than ever. Defrin stressed that there is currently no change to home front guidelines and urged the public to follow only official announcements from the IDF spokesperson and the home front command. Addressing combat officers at a ceremony in southern Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel's view is clear in regard to the negotiations between the United States and Iran.
אנחנו פועלים בצמידות עם בעלת בריתנו הגדולה ארצות הברית. הבהרתי לידידי הנשיא טראמפ את העקרונות שלדעת ישראל צריכים להנחות כל משא ומתן עם איראן. אנחנו ערוכים לכל תרחיש. ודבר אחד בטוח, אם האייתולות יטעו ויתקפו אותנו, הם יחוו תגובה שהם אפילו לא יכולים להעלות בדעתם.
During the first meeting of President Donald Trump's newly formed Board of Peace, the U.S. president laid out an ambitious post-war plan for Gaza, but also raised significant questions for Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz explains.
President Trump announced a $10 billion U.S. contribution to the initiative and said 9 countries have pledged a combined $7 billion for Gaza relief and reconstruction.
The board, under the President Trump leadership, will advance the full implementation of the 20 points plan without delay, ensuring fairness and justice for both Palestinians and Israelis. In this spirit, Qatar pledges $1 billion in support to the board mission aimed at reaching a final resolution that fulfills Palestinian aspiration for the statehood and recognition and the Israeli aspiration for security and integration.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and U.S. envoy and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner explained how the initiative is envisioned.
This is a vision of Gaza as part of a Middle East at peace. Not a phony piece of declarations no one means and agreements no one intends to keep, but a genuine commitment to a region where, whether you're a Muslim, Jew, Christian, of any faith or none, you can rise by your own efforts and feel your government by your side, not on your back.
We are here to help the people of Gaza, to lift them up and give them every opportunity to succeed. And we really see this as a partnership with them and with the Israelis to see if we can create an environment that can be peaceful, that can be functional, that can offer people the opportunity to really live a better life. And I think you've seen some of the work today, and hopefully we'll be successful. Like I said, the last one, failure is not an option.
Trump unveiled plans for an international stabilization force with Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, and Albania committing troops. The force is expected to deploy first in Rafah with a long-term target of 20,000 soldiers and 12,000 police. Egypt and Jordan are set to help train security personnel. Indonesia confirmed it will be sending troops, but insisted it will not be to disarm Hamas. Trump said the board would help oversee reconstruction and even look over the United Nations, signaling a shift away from traditional UN-led mechanisms. Several close U.S. allies have so far declined to join amid concerns about structure, funding requirements, and political influence. For Israel, the implications are significant. A foreign-led stabilization force in Gaza could reduce direct IDF burden, but also raises questions about security coordination, the disarming of Hamas, rules of engagement, and who controls post-war governance. But as Secretary of State Rubio pointed out, there is no Plan B.
We want to talk a little bit about the strategic vision of this organization. We have to get this right. There is no Plan B for Gaza. Plan B is going back to war. No one here wants that. Plan A, the only path forward, is one that rebuilds Gaza in a way of enduring and sustainable peace, where everyone can live there side by side with one another and never worry again about returning to conflict, to war, to human suffering, and to destruction.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with the welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Saudi reports claim that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is now effectively running Hezbollah, preparing the Lebanese terror group for a possible war with Israel and the United States. The IDF has been taking preventative measures, striking Hezbollah targets deep inside Lebanon. ILTV's Alec Pullard has more.
According to sources quoted by Al Arabiya, IRGC officers recently arrived in Lebanon and are rebuilding Hezbollah's military capabilities, including its missile forces, even briefing fighters in the Bekaa Valley, where Israeli airstrikes hit over the weekend. Lebanese political sources warn Beirut must stay neutral in any U.S.-Iran conflict, amid reports Tehran is pressurizing Hezbollah to join the fight. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem has said the group would not be neutral, fueling concerns of a wider escalation. Over the weekend, Hezbollah says 8 of its operatives were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon's eastern Bekaa Valley, including a figure it identified as a commander, Hussein Mohammad Yagi. The IDF said it targeted 3 Hezbollah missile command centers, killing a large number of operatives. Lebanese media report at least 10 people were killed and more than 50 wounded. President Joseph Aoun condemned the recent Israeli airstrikes in the Sidon and Bekaa Valley regions, saying the attacks frustrate efforts to stabilize the country. Aoun called the strikes a hostile act that undermines diplomatic initiatives led by Lebanon and its partners, including the United States. At the same time, Aoun is indicating that Beirut must stay neutral in any U.S.-Iran conflict, amid reports Tehran is pressurizing Hezbollah to join the fight.
Some 80,000 Muslim worshippers gathered at Al-Aqsa Mosque this weekend for the first Friday prayers of Ramadan, the largest such gathering since last year, with police deploying thousands of officers across Jerusalem's Old City. Despite heightened tensions and strict entry limits, the prayers ended without major incident. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Under heavy security, tens of thousands of worshippers filled the Al-Aqsa compound on the Temple Mount for the holy month's first Friday prayers. Police set up roadblocks, deployed border police in force, and used advanced surveillance measures to prevent unrest at the sensitive site, sacred to Muslims as Al-Aqsa and to Jews as the Temple Mount. Israel allowed some 8,500 Palestinians from Judea and Samaria to enter Jerusalem through checkpoints, below the 10,000-person cap announced ahead of Ramadan. Only men 55 and older, women 50 and older, and children 12 and under, accompanied by a close relative, were permitted to enter. The Islamic Waqf, which administers the site, said 80,000 attended, down from 90,000 last year and far below pre-2023 war levels when hundreds of thousands participated. During Ramadan, Israeli security forces will remain massively boosted in and around Jerusalem to maintain order at sensitive holy sites and prevent violence. As worshippers exited through heavily guarded gates, including Lion's Gate, authorities say the day concluded orderly, a carefully managed start to Ramadan in the Israeli capital city, where religion and security remain closely intertwined.
ILTV is partnering with Regavim to spotlight one of the most critical issues facing Israel today, the protection of our national land and resources. Regavim works on the ground, in the courts, and in the Knesset to expose illegal land seizures, defend the rule of law, and safeguard Israel's heartland, especially in Judea and Samaria. If you want real data and a deeper understanding of what's happening beyond the headlines, scan the QR code on your screen or visit regavim.org and sign up for their newsletter. Learn how you can play a role in safeguarding the land of Israel. Now, U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson is facing backlash after falsely claiming that President Isaac Herzog visited Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. He made the comments during a combative interview in Israel with the U.S. ambassador, Mike Huckabee.
Current president of Israel, current president, who I know you know, President Herzog, know him very well, apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosures.
Well, our correspondent Alec Pollard is with us now. What can you tell us about this faux pas of Tucker Carlson?
Right. Well, first of all, interview in Israel is a little bit misleading because he didn't leave the airport, as you probably know. He said, I'm flying to Israel after slandering Israel so much from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from all these countries, of whom he has nothing negative to say, by the way. So he stopped by only in the airport to do this interview with Mike Huckabee, where he threw around a bunch of accusations and some may say false facts about Israel. For example, the persecution of Christians that he claims that is happening in Israel. And Mike Huckabee responded to that. For example, the question of how Christians are treated in Qatar, where they're not even citizens, they're only foreign workers. So there was a bunch of things. This is a pattern that Tucker has been going down now for the past year and a half or so of being very aggressive against Israel, very combative, very slanderous. And this is the latest episode. He then afterwards received a letter from President Herzog's office where they vehemently denied any connection whatsoever to Epstein. And actually, Tucker Carlson apologized on X. He said that he doesn't take it lightly making such accusations, and actually issued a public apology on this. But it's kind of clear where he's leaning, and he does have a massive audience. And we have to sort of wait and see all of this posturing that he's been doing in the past year and a half, what type of effect that's going to have on the base of the Republican Party in the coming years, which is very split on the issue of Israel. And Tucker is certainly the most prominent media figure in that wing that is not very appreciative of Israel and doesn't like Israel at all.
Right. Well, it's certainly been controversial. His short visit to the airport has made a lot of headlines here, including his claim that he was interrogated before the airport itself released footage showing otherwise, we'll say. But thanks so much for your insights today, Alec. Last night, Israeli eyes were on the Muay Thai fight in Lithuania as Israeli fighter Ahavat Hashem Gordon took on Turkish opponent after the two had a tense face-off the day before. At a UTMA premier event in Lithuania, Ahavat Hashem, nicknamed Golden Boy Gordon, faced off against Turkish boxer Ali Koyuncu in a heated fight that lasted only 2 rounds. Draped in an Israeli flag, Ahavat Hashem ended the short match with a stunning knockout blow to the neck. After a gushing wound and profuse bleeding, the refs called the match, and Ahavat Hashem emerged victorious. This win was incredibly special as the customary threats before the high-profile boxing match quickly turned anti-Semitic. Despite the doubts and criticism, Ahavat Hashem Gordon aims to be the next UTMA champion. And here in Israel, we're all rooting for this rising star. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see rainy showers alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. Today we have a major scandal to expose that warrants a prompt investigation in the US and UK into Western influencers who are shilling for the Islamic Republic of Iran, going on influencer trips to sanitize the regime's image after their massacre of their own citizens. Currently, the regime is under extensive international sanctions for a litany of crimes, but it's already admitted that it funds foreign influencer delegations to rehabilitate its global image in recent years, and now they're doing it with the US and UK citizens. Here's what we know. In 2023, the Islamic Consultative Assembly approved a cultural budget provision authorizing the Islamic Culture and Relations Organization, ICRO, and similar state bodies to enter into contracts with foreign nationals for up to $20 million. Yeah, $20 million for the promotion and marketing of the regime. In November 2024, the Tehran municipality even admitted that it paid for a delegation of 12 foreign influencers, covering hotel and travel expenses. Regime media also reported that government bodies financed those trips. Yet mysteriously, separate reporting in regime media described municipal media contracts whose details later disappeared from the regime's transparency portal, particularly spending tied to media and social media outreach. How convenient. Well, one of these vile individuals on the current trip is Pakistani-British Islamist Bushra Sheikh. Now, Bushra is a Hamas fangirl, and she's publicly described activists tearing down posters of kidnapped Israeli hostages as heroic. She advocates for Sharia law openly while living in the United Kingdom, where she benefits from the protections of a secular democratic system and does not herself wear a hijab. Now, she's inside Iran, a country where women are imprisoned or worse for refusing mandatory hijab. And she's so tone deaf that she actually filmed herself bragging about not wearing a hijab and falsely implied that women have a choice in Iran. Ironically, in subsequent videos from inside Iran, she is wearing one. I guess it's maybe not so free after all, Bushra? Take a look.
What's amazing, guys, is I have walked this entire rally in the middle of Iran without a hijab on. And I know what loads of you are thinking. You're thinking, how is she in the middle of Tehran at that square without her scarf on? Nothing has happened to me. Nobody has abused me. Nobody has said anything. In fact, when you are a visitor in Iran, they treat you so well, even me, without a hijab. But it's the fact that I have come here, I have been welcomed, and nobody has said a single thing to me about my hair being uncovered. And that, for you, my friends, is the reality of news when it's brought to you live from the country, especially when you have been propagandized for a long time by Western media. And that is simply not true.
Absolutely delusional, not to mention a slap in the face to all of the women of Iran who have suffered under the morality police. Just disgusting, a despicable, shameful person. Now, it's also relevant that in 2024, she publicly posted that she'd been invited by Iranian ministers to join an official 10-day conference tour. Now, I can't confirm whether that prior invitation resulted in a government-funded trip, and she hasn't publicly stated that this current visit is government-sponsored, but it establishes prior direct engagement with regime officials in an official capacity. And given the sites she's visited on this tour, it's highly likely that this is indeed a government-paid tour. But beyond being morally despicable, there is a legal angle to this issue that needs to be investigated and thoroughly. Under the UK's Iran Sanctions Regulations 2023, UK nationals are bound by sanctions law wherever they are in the world. They're prohibited from dealing with the funds or economic resources of a designated person, or from receiving economic resources from a designated entity without a license from the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. Economic resources can include flights, hotels, hospitality, logistics, and other travel expenses provided in kind. If a UK national participating in this current delegation received travel, accommodation, or other economic resources funded through the regime bodies, that could constitute a prohibited dealing under UK sanctions law, unless an OFSI license was obtained, which I find highly unlikely to be the case for Bushra. The UK government must investigate her. This isn't just an issue of her unfathomably heinous views, rather it's an issue of national security. But she wasn't alone. Calla Walsh is another revolting activist on this same delegation right now. She's the founder of Palestine Action US, a former Democratic Party progressive activist, and of course a communist. Real winner there. Anyway, this isn't actually her first trip to Iran. On a previous visit, she was filmed chanting "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." She also visited IRGC weapon sites and praised institutions tied to the IRGC, which is a designated terror group by the United States and subject to extensive sanctions. Under U.S. sanctions law, U.S. persons are broadly prohibited from engaging in transactions with the government of Iran or with designated entities such as the IRGC without a specific license. Now, that prohibition includes receiving funds or things of value from sanctioned entities and providing services to them. OFAC defines services broadly, and it can include promotional activities or participation in events that materially benefit sanctioned bodies. There are narrow exceptions for journalism, humanitarian work, or licensed academic exchanges. Calla Walsh doesn't fall into any of those categories. If she received travel or accommodation funded by the government of Iran, Tehran municipality, IRGC-linked institutions, or affiliated cultural bodies, or if she provided services that materially benefited those sanctioned entities, such as providing propaganda to sanitize the regime's image as she has done, that could easily fall within the scope of OFAC enforcement. The regime has already admitted that it funds these types of delegations. It's admitted covering expenses in the past. It's authorized contracts with foreign individuals for image promotion. And given that documented pattern, the question is whether Western nationals currently participating in this delegation received economic resources or provided services in violation of sanctions law. And that is a question that deserves investigation as soon as possible. Well, it's been a busy weekend, and I myself just returned from Munich, where I spoke at the massive Iranian protest alongside numerous European MPs, Senator Lindsey Graham, and the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. And what a protest it was. More than 250,000 people came out in the freezing rain to send a message to the United States and the entire Western world that the Iranian people need assistance. Yes, military assistance with bringing down the Islamic Republic. As we've seen consistently in recent weeks, the Iranian people are waiting with bated breath to see if the United States will strike the Islamic Republic and help them bring down their oppressors. President Trump has made stern warnings to the regime, but continues to say that his first choice is to avoid a military conflict and make a deal, something that I would argue is completely misguided in the first place, unless it's simply posturing. That said, we did see a bit of a change of tune from President Trump again this week. Let's take a look.
Offers heat change in Iran? Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. Tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, and other carriers going out shortly. So we'll see it how if we could get it settled for once and for all, that'd be good. What do you want it for? What? Would you want to take over? I don't want to talk about that. There are people.
Well, interesting response from President Trump. Definitely a welcome comment, given his previous comments. But it'll be interesting to see what he means by hopefully we can get it all done. President Trump has indeed sent a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East this past week, and the U.S. military is poised and positioned to begin what looks like, or what could be, a large-scale operation against the Islamic regime in Iran. But they're still trying to negotiate, and most recently, the Islamic regime has offered to establish economic ties that would benefit the U.S. as part of this negotiating strategy. But the truth is, there's nothing the Islamic Republic can offer other than their resignation that would be sufficient. As I said on the stage in Munich, Iranians aren't interested in a deal. 40,000 of them, more than 40,000, didn't die so that they can make a deal that limits yet preserves the Islamic regime. But it wasn't just in Munich that this important event took place on Saturday. Yes, this week is the Munich Security Conference, an important meeting of world leaders, particularly from Europe, analyzing national security issues. That was why that main demonstration was held in Munich. But we also saw hundreds of thousands of people show up to protest all over the world on behalf of the people of Iran. In Los Angeles, more than 370,000 people came. In Toronto, 500,000. And incidentally, in every single protest, Israeli flags were present, not just being held by Israelis, but by Iranians. In Munich, for the first time in my life, I felt safe walking with an Israeli flag in Europe, which is a little bit sad, but also a clear reflection of where Iranians stand. These people are pouring their hearts and souls out into the streets for the hope of freedom and regime change in Iran. And they sent a clear message that was heard around the world through just one day of peaceful protesting. And let me break this down for you a little bit more, because honestly, it's truly remarkable that many people were involved in so many places and that no one got arrested or had any kind of incident. Iranians have not only demonstrated to the world that they want regime change and that they want Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the transitional leader, but they've also sent a message to the world on how to behave in major protests. Everywhere there were protests of Iranians, there were zero incidents, and the protesters behaved with respect for each other, for the environment, and for law enforcement. Now, contrast that to the encampments on campuses in the U.S. or the violent anti-Israel protests that we saw for more than 2 years after October 7th. Iranians brought flowers for law enforcement, and I witnessed them repeatedly thanking them for their efforts to keep the peace. And do you remember how Palestinian activists left the protests after the fact? A complete mess with trash and destruction everywhere that they left for others to clean up for them. In contrast, Iranians spent hours cleaning up trash, including in the freezing cold in Toronto and in Munich, to ensure that they respected the countries that allowed them the freedom to protest, a freedom that they don't have inside of Iran right now. This isn't to put on a show. It's a part of who they are. It's their character and their culture, and that is something that, frankly, even in Israel, we could take a lesson from. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15 to 17 at the Waldorf Astoria here in Jerusalem. Register today at jns-summit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. Looking forward to seeing you here in Jerusalem. But while the Iranian people have made their demands peacefully and clearly, some, it seems, are still trying to subvert that message. Despite the fact that we saw an unprecedented scale of protests internationally from the Iranian diaspora and allies, some media networks, including Voice of America Farsi, which is funded by U.S. taxpayers, seem to be intentionally avoiding reporting on this issue. How can more than 1 million people around the world unite with one common demand, yet VOA Farsi doesn't even report it? Now, VOA Farsi has come under harsh criticism lately after Kari Lake, a Trump appointee, hired Ali Javanmardi to lead the channel. Javanmardi is an Iranian Kurdish journalist who has been accused of being a separatist and promoting separatist ideology, which is something that the Iranian people, including the majority of Iranians, strongly and passionately oppose. Territorial integrity is a core value of the Iranian people. But it's clear that whatever is actually going on with Javan Mardi is not in agreement with what the Iranian people are demanding right now. And instead of doing his job and reporting properly, there seems to be a censorship of Iranian voices inside Iran and abroad that are calling for the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to become the transitional leader. Now, throughout the protests in Iran, the coverage on VOA Farsi was wildly skewed, and there were reports, though unconfirmed, that VOA Farsi journalists were directed not to share videos and content of people on the ground risking their lives to call for the return of Reza Pahlavi. Now, even more concerning is that the MEK group, which I explained about last week, is a Marxist Islamist group that helped Khomeini come to power in '79. They too held a small demonstration in Munich the day before. Funny enough, that showed up in VOA Farsi, but not the 250,000 patriots demanding regime change. VOA Farsi has an important role in distributing information to Iranians in the voice of the United States. Literally, it's funded by the taxpayer. So why is Javan Mardi seemingly promoting an agenda that isn't in the interest of Iranians or in the interests of the United States? The bias is blatant and it warrants action. Literally, the last thing that an American taxpayer-funded news network should be doing is silencing the will of the Iranian people. Now, Kari Lake is aware of this problem, as many Iranians have complained to her. Yet instead of taking action to remedy the problem, she's proceeded to block Iranians who call this out and even double down on defending Javan Mardi. I would like to give Kari Lake the benefit of the doubt and assume that she just doesn't really understand the sensitivities of this issue for Iranians, but if that's really the case, blocking Iranians who are trying to tell you otherwise is not the way forward. And with that, let's jump to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week. Now, I know the whole point of the good, the bad, and the ugly is the phrase, but I've heard from you guys that you don't like to end the show on such a negative note. So from now on, I'm going to do things a little differently with the good, the bad, and the ugly in a different order. We'll start with the ugly story, move to the bad story, and finish off on a positive note with the good story of the week. So to kick things off, the ugly story of the week: extremism in Israel. Yes, in Israel. This week, disturbing footage was released yesterday of two female Israeli police officers being chased and harassed by a mob of ultra-Orthodox Israelis in Bnei Brak. Apparently, this happened because they went to visit another officer in the area, and the extremists began violently rioting, overturned a police car, and the two officers had to be extracted physically. Take a look at what happened. Disgusting behavior, difficult to watch, but unfortunately, this isn't the first time that we've seen things like this happen. Right now, Israel is facing a major internal political issue, as many of the ultra-Orthodox are exempt from the army draft. Now, there's been an ongoing effort to remedy that because, in my opinion, everyone should serve their country equally. There shouldn't be different standards for different people if they're all citizens, especially when national service within their own communities is an option. However, we have seen that some rabbis have actually incited against IDF soldiers and the state of Israel itself in order to advance their own political agendas and interests, which really ultimately damages both sides. There have also been ongoing efforts in segments of the ultra-Orthodox population, of course not all of them, that have been engaging in a campaign to erase women from public life and conversation as much as possible. We've seen some of these extremists defacing advertisements that feature women in recent years and otherwise behaving in ways that honestly have more in common with the morality police in Iran than they do with the values of the state of Israel. It's completely unacceptable, and it's against Judaism. You don't get to just destroy other people's property because you don't like something. You don't get to threaten and harass women, screaming and cursing like savages because they're different from you. It's something that this society should never accept, whether religious or secular. Erasing women from society not only leads to a stagnated economy, but it also means that their needs, even at the most basic level like healthcare, aren't met. It means their issues related to things like health aren't on the agenda because people don't know about them. It means that what makes them successful, contributing members of society isn't a priority for the nation. And it means that they're excluded from the rooms where conversations that affect their very futures take place. This is something that goes against everything that we believe in. Piousness doesn't equate to the erasure of a woman's voice. And now our bad story of the week is a bit of a good take on a bad phenomenon. There's an activist and a friend of mine called Adiel Cohen who creates amazing content about Israel. Now, he's been traveling all around the world, especially in Latin America, and meeting with people from different countries. And he has a variety of colorful stories to tell, both positive and negative, as would somewhat be expected. But the one phenomenon that we continue to see around the world that is amplified by social media is the tolerated hatred, specifically of Israeli and Jewish people. We're currently living in an environment in which people think that discrimination against Jewish people is acceptable because they see it so much on social media. So Adiel decided to throw it back in their faces a little bit and put it into perspective. Let's take a look.
Excuse me, Mr. Guide. There's a group of black people here, and, can I just switch groups? Because it's making me feel really uncomfortable.
I'm in this scuba trip with 3 Asians, and, I just don't want to talk to them. It's making me seem like I'm antisocial, but, I don't want to talk to them, because, with all that happened in World War II, what the Japanese did, what if their grandparents did some fucked up shit in Vietnam? I don't know.
Where's it from? Armenia. Oh, I'm all for Azerbaijan, by the way, just so you know, just putting it out there. From Ukraine. Interesting. Did you kill in Russian? Free Catalonia. Free Catalonia. Yeah. I said free Catalonia, Visiting from France, right? Welcome, yeah. We don't really like you people here. From Dubai. Oh, that's cool. You have a lot of money to travel, right? Because you guys are really rich. And you guys control the, you guys have a lot of money. That you're from China? Oh.
Of course, beyond being funny, he is unfortunately absolutely correct. None of us would or should accept this type of hateful bigotry and discrimination against various minorities and nationalities that we may encounter. And yet every one of these examples is an actual video that's gone viral, or at least semi-viral, on social media, of people thinking that it's acceptable to say these kinds of things about Jews and or Israelis. It isn't. If you wouldn't say this about any other minority group, why would you think it's okay to say about Jews? You don't have to like Israeli policy or to like the Israeli government to be a decent and civilized human being towards people you may disagree with. The fact that this radicalism has been tolerated more and more with every day and further amplified by social media is a social phenomenon that has the potential to destroy the West. Just as I always warned that what starts with Jews never ends with the Jews. We have to push back against this before it grows even larger. The bigotry that we see in some of the online content today is sheer demonization and dehumanization of millions of people based on their nationality. Those are not the values of the Western world. Those are not the values of a liberal democracy. Those are the values of a third world jihadist cult. And unfortunately, the West has allowed far too many of those people into their countries. It's time to push back. And finally, our good story of the week, which comes from none other than U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who this week addressed that Munich security conference I mentioned earlier when I was there. Now, his entire speech was absolutely phenomenal. So much so that he even got a standing ovation from the Europeans, not something to be taken lightly these days. But the way that he spoke about the failures and the current state of the international community, particularly the UN, is exactly what the entire world needs to hear. Let's take a look.
We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. and it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world.
Exactly.
And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law, which they themselves routinely violate.
Exactly. It's a tragic but correct assessment of the status quo today. And the longer that Europe and the rest of the Western world ignore it, the harder it's going to be to reform it. I remind you that this past week, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sent a letter to the Islamic Republic of Iran extending his warmest greetings on behalf of the anniversary of the Islamic regime. This is a matter of weeks after that same regime brutally massacred more than 40,000 people and continues carrying out torture, sexual violence, and executions of Iranian citizens for protesting. If that's not enough, the UN also invited an official of the Islamic Republic to address the Human Rights Council. After immense pushback, they canceled the invitation, but invited a different official instead. They just can't get it right. And that is exactly what shows how correct Marco Rubio was in everything he said. And that does it for this week on Axis of Truth. We will, as always, be back next week with more stories and updates from across the region. If you have a story for me, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. And we'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS.
New evidence obtained by ILTV shows the Islamic Republic is paying for influencers, including from the United States and United Kingdom, to whitewash the regime's crimes against the Iranian people, something which may violate U.S. sanctions law. Let's take a closer look. Outrage from Iranians inside and outside the country.
Glory to all the martyrs.
A delegation of 15 influencers tour Iran on what appears to be the regime's dime.
Police in Iran are defending the revolution and are defending their government.
The delegation was organized by the Sob Media Center, Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting.
Never fall into alternative propaganda.
Additional risks include the possibility of recruitment for espionage or hostage-taking for foreign nationals.
What's amazing, guys, is I have walked this entire rally in the middle of Iran without a hijab on.
A delegation of 15 influencers tour Iran on what appears to be the regime's dime, even as Tehran continues its violent crackdown after a campaign of mass murder of its own citizens. This week, an ILTV investigation has discovered that among the participants are U.S. national Kala Walsh and a UK national Bushra Sheikh, raising serious concerns about sanctions violations both in Washington and in London. The delegation was organized by the Sob Media Center, a state-linked entity affiliated with the state media network, Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting. The organizer of the tour has also been identified as Ahmed Norouzi, the vice president of IRIB's World Service. According to the U.S. Treasury, Norouzi is listed on the specially designated nationals list under the Iran sanctions program. Treasury records link him directly to IRIB, which the U.S. sanctioned for broadcasting forced confessions and acting as a tool of state repression. In late January, Norouzi publicly issued a call for filmmakers and activists to join what he described as a special media tour to Iran. Photos posted from inside the country show members of the delegation attending official meetings and regime gatherings. In one image shared by Bushra Sheikh, Norouzi appeared seated at the head of a formal meeting during the visit. Also among the participants is U.S. national Kala Walsh, and this is not her first visit. During a previous regime-organized trip, also by Sob, Walsh appeared on stage at an event in Iran where she chanted, "Death to America."
May we see victory within our lifetimes. Margbar America, Margbar Israel.
Iranian state and parliamentary records show that the Iranian parliament approved a cultural budget provision authorizing up to $20 million for contracts with foreign individuals to assist in nation branding. Reporting in November 2024 from Iranian state media also confirmed that the Tehran municipality covered flights and hospitality costs for a delegation of 12 foreign influencers.
The trip by these influencers to Iran raises tremendous concerns. I believe that the Sob International Media Festival is kind of a repackaged outfit for the Islamic Republic to use to recruit Westerners to amplify the regime's propaganda to Western audiences.
Additional risks include the possibility of recruitment for espionage or hostage-taking for foreign nationals from both the U.S. and the UK.
There have been instances where one arm of the Iranian state invites American or your Western nationals to a, quote, conference in Iran, only for another arm of the Iranian state to take them hostage. And we've seen this before in some hostage cases.
As of now, neither the U.S. nor the UK authorities have publicly announced an investigation. However, based on publicly available documentation, the participation of both of them in a state-sponsored trip organized by a U.S.-sanctioned official presents significant potential legal exposure under existing sanctions frameworks.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Here is everything that you need to know. The signs of war are growing, and these are the latest developments of the last hour. Lebanese media is reporting that American officials from the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon have been evacuated from the country. India, whose Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to arrive in Israel next week, has issued evacuation warnings to its citizens in Iran, urging them to leave immediately. In the United States, the Trump administration and its closest circles are heavily signaling escalation. President Donald Trump posted to his Truth Social account this commentary by Jewish analyst Mark Levin on why America should not negotiate with Iran. At the same time, the American conservative journalist Laura Loomer, who is reportedly close with the Trump administration, tweeted this today, that there will be an interesting day. These developments follow a report by Axios this morning where President Trump has reportedly given the Islamic regime an ultimatum: either present a detailed nuclear proposal within 48 hours or risk the collapse of talks. Should the regime submit a proposal, talks between Iranian and American negotiators will continue in Geneva. But if not, the American armada in the region is poised and ready to strike. Washington is still seeking a zero enrichment policy, although reports are now suggesting that a possible compromise is being discussed, allowing Iran a strictly limited enrichment program for medical purposes only. Iranian official Ali Larijani is expected to present Washington with a proposal in the coming days in what appears to be the last effort to avoid a widespread regional conflict. And meanwhile, inside Tehran, the Islamic regime is preparing for an imminent escalation. Iranian officials are stressing that any American attack would not be limited and will offer a severe blow to the regime. To combat the growing threat, Ayatollah Khamenei has been quietly restructuring the Islamic Republic's capabilities and power in the country and the general region. Larijani, a former IRGC commander, has now been entrusted with much of the country's day-to-day control. Successors for key military and government roles have also been named in the case of an assassination attempt. Larijani has effectively been running the crisis management since January, sidelining President Pezeshkian as Tehran faces anti-regime protests at home and a growing threat of an American attack. And speaking of internal unrest in Tehran continues as university campuses across Iran are seeing a second day of mass protests and mourning. Demonstrations were reported at 5 universities in Tehran and 1 in Mashhad, with most centered around 40-day memorial services for the thousands that have been killed in last month's brutal crackdown on nationwide unrest. The students were seen openly defying the Islamic Republic, burning the Islamic regime flag in their hijabs, tearing down posters of former IRGC personnel previously eliminated by Israel, and waving the flag of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who was widely supported as Iran's transitional leader. These are images never before seen from Iran prior to the nationwide protests of January, signaling an incredibly weak regime, but an even stronger people of Iran. Moving now to Gaza, the IDF released a video of the demolition of a Hamas terror tunnel in southern Gaza's Rafah area. According to the military, troops of the 7th Brigade, in cooperation with Yahalom combat engineers, eliminated several Hamas terrorists who were operating from within the underground tunnels. Terrorist infrastructure sites were dismantled, including a kilometer-long tunnel containing weapons and hideouts. In a moment of partial closure, troops dismantled the tunnel shaft in which reserve soldier Master Sergeant Effie Feldbaum, who fell on October 28, 2025. In addition, the IDF confirmed the elimination of Hamas operatives who once again violated the ceasefire and crossed the yellow line, posing an immediate threat to troops in the area. Following the identification, the troops eliminated the terrorists swiftly, removing the threat. And finally, an initial report coming out of a thwarted terror attack in northern Israel. According to various unconfirmed reports, Israel's Shin Bet and police thwarted a terror attack in Carmiel, where the targets were soldiers. 4 suspects have been arrested, and the story is developing. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Quickly before we go, I want to encourage you to scan the QR code that's on your screen to get updates on our ILTV WhatsApp channel. But that's all for now. I'm Deva Klein, and thank you so much for joining us on ILTV on the Hour. I'll see you soon.
Yesterday, we saw the pattern again. President Donald Trump extends a path to negotiation. And within hours, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responds not with diplomacy, but with a threat. He acknowledged the power of American aircraft carriers, saying, "Of course, a warship is a dangerous piece of military hardware." Then he added, "More dangerous than that warship is the weapon that can send that warship to the bottom of the sea." This was not Khamenei rhetoric. This was a direct threat to American forces in the region. And then came the personal taunt against President Trump. Khamenei mocked President Trump's statements about the survival of the Islamic Republic, saying, "Oh, that's a good confession." And then he declared Trump will not be able to eliminate the regime. Now, here's the problem. Khamenei still doesn't understand Trump's handshake doctrine. Trump does not begin with war, he begins with a handshake. But the handshake, it's not a weakness, it is a test. If you accept it, you get a deal. If you mock it, you get pressure. If you threaten it, you're going to get the consequences. Iran has misread this before, and if Khamenei thinks that this is just a theoretical bluster, he may be surprised again. My guest today is Rafael Yosef, a senior fellow at the Herut Center, one of Israel's fastest rising stars in the conservative space. He's a military sniper with a lot of experience, and he's got the mind to understand the way the Middle East and the world work. My friend, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So this meeting, actually, this interview is really an outgrowth of a conversation you and I were having around a cup of coffee, really talking about what was going on between Trump and Iran, and specifically about those negotiations. But since then, Khamenei, Rafi, he's threatened the United States to send an aircraft carrier to the bottom of the sea, and he's literally poked President Trump. And, you know, I'm curious, is he kind of just egging Trump on? Is this just like a show of force, or is he aware of the consequences?
Well, is he aware of the consequences is a question. I don't know if that's the right question to ask. The question is, what does he want to gain at the end of the day? Does he know what he's going to get in return? That depends on other things like, again, what does he see religiously or politically as the future or the end of Iran? Is this a man that has something to lose or nothing to lose?
Like he could be a suicide bomber, basically, in the head chair of Iran. I mean, do you think it's possible he's willing to bring Iran to the brink out of religious conviction?
Yeah, again, we need to remember that these things aren't rational decisions. These things aren't something that's one of the main problems we have as Westerners, is to assume that people from opposing civilizations share the same concepts of common sense, that religious virtue and apocalyptic visions are somehow rational. And so we want to imbue them with what we think is actually what makes sense, what is logical. And Khamenei doesn't have this, he doesn't share the same fundamental principles. We shouldn't be asking questions of, does he know that Trump is going to strike him? Well, the question we should be asking is, what does he actually want to lead to? Then we can see how that relates to how Trump is behaving and what he's responding to Trump.
Well, let me ask you a question before we jump to what he wants to lead to. And I'm very curious what you have to say on that. What you're saying, I mean, does President Trump understand what you're saying? I mean, does he understand that Khamenei is not working according to Western principles? Because President Trump seems to be, at least in the optics, perhaps in good faith, moving towards a negotiation with Iran. How do you see that?
I think in order to answer that, you need to understand Trump's pattern. Trump has a pattern. I like to think that he does two things when he negotiates. One is a very loud red herring to fog the playing field so that he's in control of the ball, and the other is a game of chicken. Whether you look at 2019 when he had the deal of the century with Kushner, or whether you look at the Gaza deals, or you look at even the Terror 4 on Liberation Day, or any other major thing, or Trump waking up and wanting Greenland, and then right after he arrests Maduro, and right before the whole thing with Iran starts to implode again, he wakes up again and says he wants to take Greenland. Whenever Trump is behaving in a way that looks so irrational and makes us ask these questions of, doesn't he know that they think a certain way? Doesn't he know that he can't make deals with someone who he can't trust? If he's doing something that makes no sense in such a way, that should make us think, well, this guy knows power. This guy knows not just business. He knows how to make a deal. He knew how to make North Korea calm down. He knew how to make Iran calm down. He knew how to make basically every military situation that came up in his time as president. He understands geopolitics. He understands power more than everything. So whenever he starts behaving in a way that looks so ridiculous, that's what I mean when he throws a red herring. He'll suddenly say something so absurd, so obnoxious, so out of the blue that it makes his opponents look at that instead of what he's actually doing.
The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15th to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Jerusalem. Register today at jnssummit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. I look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem. All right, so take Greenland. Relate Greenland. Is Greenland somehow connected to what's happening in Iran?
I'll preface this with saying not everything is connected by some kind of pre-designed, predetermined, pre-understood concept. I think when Trump goes into a deal, whether he goes the playing chicken route or going the red herring route, Trump wants to win. He knows he'll win. I don't think he knows exactly what he'll win because he's not a prophet. So Trump going in saying that Greenland has to do with Iran is somehow saying he knows how to play the whole game in a pre-designed way.
But well, explain to me though the red herring strategy. Like try to get down to bricks and mortar.
I think
by what you
with
mean.
Greenland,
with Greenland as an example, or choose another one. I'm curious if there's a red herring strategy, how that works amidst Trump's global ambitions.
Well, his global ambitions are Pax Americana. The concept that came from Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, the idea that you're so powerful that you enforce peace because no one can attack you. Trump's doctrine is the very Reagan, Churchill kind of tradition of peace through strength. This idea that I'm so powerful, I'm not trusting that you're going to want to be my friend. I'm just going to be powerful enough that it's worth it for you to stay my friend. And so when he goes for Greenland, for example, how's this a red herring? Do you remember what happened the week before? He announced this last time that he wants to take Greenland.
Was that Maduro?
Exactly. He goes and arrests a narco-terrorist, socialist, communist tyrant,
the head of a major
country who happens to be the hub for cartel control in South America, one of them. It happens to be an avenue where Hezbollah, who is a drug distributor internationally, gets a lot of their money, where China and Iran get their hold in the Americas. And so it's a very strategic enemy for the United States in that sense. Not the Venezuelan people, as Trump said many times, just like not the Iranian people, but the regime. And so he goes and arrests him, and then his wife. And there's a lot of noise because this is unprecedented. It's like it's insane. A few days later, he wakes up and says, "I want to take Greenland." Where does everybody's attention shift to?
To Greenland.
Who's talking about Maduro right now?
Right.
That's what I mean. Now, it's not just that. I think Trump hit like 5 birds with this stone, because he also ran, what we spoke about in our conversation before, was that Trump ran back from 2015. He was already saying these things before he got elected in 2016, that the United States is being abused, whether it's NAFTA or NATO or the UN. The United States funds, I think the military expenses for NATO is 2% of your GDP. The United States pays between 3 to 5, and all the rest of the countries pay under 2. The United States funds a majority of the UN peacekeepers. They fund many of the military interests of Europe depend on America, and that's what then they use the money that they have that they don't have to use on military for welfare spending, for all kinds of government spendings internally in Europe. So the United States ends up paying a lot for the world. That was Trump's argument. We're being abused. America's money and taxpayer and our military. And not just that we're not being respected or paid back, they're not appreciating what we're doing. Just like he said in Davos, by the way, just now in the last visit, you don't have to give us Greenland, and we won't fight for it, but we won't forget. And then, of course, he threw in because he's Trump, he just had to throw in if we wouldn't have come in on January 6th, 1944, you'd all be speaking a lot of German and a little bit of Japanese.
Right, of course, that's the Trump ice.
That's the Trump kind of, you got to put a little something in there. But back to, I regress, what we were saying, Trump wants to prove that America, he's very America first. Now, we're not get into the whole conversation of America first versus America only, but Trump is very America first. And he says it because he understands, again, the Reagan doctrine of being, if you want to be the world superpower, you have to take the responsibility of the world superpower. And you have to protect the things that serve American Western interests. And Europe isn't going to do that. They're not only abusing these deals that the United States is involved in, they are also not capable of defending these things. They're not capable, as he told them.
Well, they've been emasculated. They've self-emasculated. For it's been 80 years that the United States protected Europe from the communist onslaught from the Soviet Union. Their armies are, for the most part, with the exception of a few special forces, almost like a fiction. And, that leads us back, though, to the main point of Iran. When you say that he knew, like, we can't assume that Trump doesn't know what's happening.
Right.
So what's the strategy? I want to understand. So we've got the red herring to distract people's attention. I get it. What's the game of chicken right now with Iran?
We said 2 strategies, right? We said the red herring, which, again, I just want to close what we were saying before because it was kind of open-ended. What he did with Greenland is both toss the world into a fog of not knowing what's going on with Maduro, or leaving that, and then going into proving that it is America's interest to protect Greenland. And when NATO responded or threatened to respond, it was with 13 soldiers.
13 soldiers.
What they sent in response to a pending attack from the Americans to take Greenland was that. And Trump basically showed, without needing to do anything, you can't protect yourselves. It's in your interest that I do this. And then he goes to Davos, and with very tough love, a tough love speech, he tells them that it's in your interest that we're in control. And then they reignite this deal that they had from 1951. But now America has a right to the minerals. And what that makes Greenland for the United States is something that it's worth protecting for American interests, which then protects the northern trade routes, which then protects the North Atlantic from China, from Russia, from any adversary. So Trump, I don't think he knew what he was going to get, but he knew he was going to win. And so this red herring thing, I think there's a mix.
The red herring actually turned into a profitable negotiation for the United States.
Exactly. And he, again, when you look at every one of these interactions that Trump has internationally, it's when he says something ridiculous or we don't know what he's doing. Look, think of the 12-day war. A month before, he went to Qatar. He got a plane. He didn't visit Israel. He had a fight with Bibi in the White House. And the whole world was saying, oh, it's all done. They're not friends.
Right. The optics were that he and Bibi, he and the
fighting,
Prime Minister, which have the closest relationship between two world leaders at present today and the closest relationship of any Israeli prime minister in history with a U.S. president. But the optics were that he had insulted Bibi and, basically it was unsuccessful.
And then Bibi on our side says his son is getting married. He wants to take vacation. No one knows what's going on with Iran. And then at 3:30 in the morning, we all wake up to a siren and a message just saying we're about to attack in Iran. And a couple hours, an hour later, there's a tweet from President Donald Trump that says, I gave them 60 days. Today is day 61. So again, he will fog up the field and make everyone lose focus on what's actually going on so that he controls the ball. The issue with chicken, the game chicken, there are many versions. You drive towards each other, towards a cliff, and the first one that quits loses.
Or the typical, just for our viewers, the tractor against the tractor, right?
Yeah.
Two tractors heading down, full speed, one against each other, in between the rows of corn, and who's going to be the one that's going to swerve off at the end.
Right. Trump does that with his handshake. And that's why I think when we spoke about it, that's why maybe you started this conversation with that, is that Trump will pull people in. And it's physically, he'll pull you in when he shakes your hand, and he'll keep going until he feels he's got enough, and then he'll let go. And we saw that, I think the loudest example was the tariff war. Now we can argue it's a different conversation if it was successful, really, if the political aims that he wanted to get by 0 for 0 trade or lowering actual tariff.
The tariff war against Europe.
The world. Basically, he got I think the administration claimed that they got 30 countries to get to 0 for 0 trade, complete free trade,
zero tariff.
Yes, and then it seems that what he did was he basically showed the world, look what I can do to the market. Look what I can do to the market. Do you like me, or do you like the ones who are stealing your tech and your intellectual property, and you can't trust with their deals and are trying to ruin our economy? Which side are you going to go for? And then when he felt that he made that point enough, then he lets go. And everyone was telling him, back off the ramp. You've made enough. You've won. It's getting dangerous. Investors don't know what's going on. No one knows what to do. And then he lets go. And then things settle down. And then he basically relinquishes tariffs from everyone but China. And again, did he know everything that's going to happen from the start? Did he know exactly how long he was going to pull this, stretch this out for? No. But I think he knows Trump is very good with power because he knows when to let go when he's won enough. So when he plays chicken.
By the way, I just want to add one thing to that. We know that how the world looked at that game of chicken because the S&P 500 just kept going up and up and up and was reaching, all-time highs while they were screaming terror. There's a wolf in the hen house. And at the end of the day, the S&P skyrocketing. Okay, the dollar's a little bit weaker, but the U.S. will probably recover from that. But consumer confidence is very, very high with what Trump's doing.
It's almost as if a strong United States would affect investors for the United States. It's almost as if a strong America means a strong American economy.
Right.
Almost.
So go ahead. Continue the chicken. Now apply the chicken strategies, playing chicken with Iran. How does that apply to the negotiations that took place yesterday?
When he came to Israel with Kushner and they wanted to have the deal of the century, there was a very loud conversation here, especially in the Tilumi world, the religious, how would you translate?
Religious Zionist
world, which was saying we're not going to give up any land because the deal basically said Israel will recognize a Palestinian state. And at that point, the religious Zionists, they stopped listening. No, there's no way we can't afford this. We've done this before. We're not going to repeat this mistake. But the rest of the conversation, the rest of the deal was Hamas has to disarm. They have to recognize East Jerusalem. They have to recognize Shiloh. They have to recognize Ali. They have to recognize Hebron. They have to recognize all these things, that it's a one-sided deal.
And Israel was going to be declaring sovereignty. This was the key.
Right.
Sovereignty over Area C.
Right.
And that was going to take place anyway, with or without the deal, right? That's the key. That's the key. The maps had been, right, I saw the maps. This was an interesting approach that the Israeli government tried moving forward. I think we didn't manage maybe to move forward fast enough, but Israel was going to be declaring sovereignty over Area C.
Right. Again, the point here is one-sided deal. It was obvious, not the PLO nor Hamas, because who are you addressing when you talk about Palestine? They're not going to disarm, either of them. The pay for slay administration of Abbas, they're not going to stop. They're not going to recognize these things. But if Israel comes and says, I'm willing to play ball, just like I did every single time this was on the table, then it gives legitimacy from an American point of view. And I think what Trump is doing is a little bit of that on the American end now, because I don't think he has any doubt in his mind that Khamenei. Do you know what the concept of Hudaybiyah in Islam is?
Tell us.
Hudaybiyah is based on a deal that Muhammad made with the Jew. It's a mix of the tribes in Mecca.
Mostly Jewish tribes.
Tribes.
That's what's really quoted here in the Quran.
And he turns to the tribes in Mecca who have an alliance with the tribes in Medina. And he tells them that if they don't protect their allies and Muhammad and his army can go and conquer them, then he won't attack those in Mecca. And he goes and does that. He grows to be big enough. And then he turns back to those in Mecca and he attacks them. And then this goes back and he goes to the Jews of Khaybar, and where all the Jews from the region are starting to evacuate to because Muhammad is conquering the land. And he tells them to send emissaries, basically the leaders, the elders of the tribe, in order to come to some kind of understanding. And of course, when they come, while they were promised safe travels in return, they're slaughtered. And so the Jewish tribes are left without leadership, and then it's easier for Muhammad to take over. This concept is that all agreements are temporary. They are all part of the greater goal of Islam. Islam in general, there are the Muslim version of the Jewish halakha, the categorical way of acting your beliefs, has had a law for the Sunnis in Iraq from the pending Shia attack that said that if the Shiites attack, you're allowed to fake being a Shiite in order to not be slaughtered, so that when they're weak, then you can come back and slaughter them yourself. And it's this idea that the end goal, well, how do they say, I don't remember the quote in Arabic, but Allah favors those who have patience. So when we started this conversation, he asked, does Khamenei know what he's doing? Does he not know that Trump is going to destroy him? And on the other hand, does Trump not understand that this guy believes in Hudaybiyah? When Arafat was asked in Johannesburg, why is he working with the Zionists for the Oslo Accords? He answered one word, Hudaybiyah. When Natzil was asked, why is he going to have peace with the Zionists? He said the same word, because the Muslim word understands what the Westerners don't. And so this aspect of the Middle East, when we say we need to speak Arabic in the Middle East, we really need to understand what they mean when they use these kinds of words, and when they try to confuse us by using very friendly Western words when they tell each other Hudaybiyah. Now,
so they're using, the art of illusion, kind of the Hudna art, long-term thinking, where the West is short-term thinking, right? The West has walked into the idea of a Hudna, a ceasefire, right? Time and time again, the Biden administration, Israeli administrations in the past have taken this idea of a Hudna, which is a ceasefire, which they mean temporary. Temporary agreements of eventually we can destroy you. And because they're long-term thinkers, they have an advantage. Because the West is generally short-term thinkers, they walk into this for some preservation of immediate peace sometimes.
Right.
Now you've got them using this art of illusion, and you've got Trump on the other side creating a fog, Where do these two things, where are they going to meet, in your opinion?
So here comes in what Trump, I think, is doing is he wants. I started by talking about the deal of the century he had with Kushner. I think what he's doing here is exposing that there's no one to talk to. I think he knows that popularly, Trump, as Ben Shapiro says a lot, Trump is a pragmatist. Trump is very good at reading the tide. He knows to see where things are flowing and what, you're seeing that with ICE right now in Minnesota and how they're dealing that he swapped Kristi Noem with Tom Homan. He's doing things very pragmatically because he understands how people are perceiving these things. And he looks at the West right now and he sees that they do not understand that the Muslims see all the way to Vienna. Muslims think that the entire Balkan all the way to Vienna is Waqf. They don't even understand what that word means. They don't understand that Western dominance over that territory, over what was Islamic territory, is temporary.
Explain. I think for the audience, it's worthwhile explaining the idea of what happens with the Waqf and once conquered,
so
relinquished.
People tend to forget that conquest is one of the most ancient human endeavors. Whenever someone is powerful enough, that's what they do. Everywhere on the globe. It could be the Aztecs in Mexico. It could be the Mongols in Asia. It could be the Arabs crossing across, spanning across northern Africa and the entire Arab Peninsula. And the Muslim understanding of the world is that once a land is conquered in the name of Allah, it is Muslim territory. If they controlled the caliphates of the Barbary states, the Barbary Caliphate or the Ottoman Caliphate or any other, that land is eternally Muslim. It will return to be Muslim.
And that, by the way, is their belief over the land of Israel.
Exactly. Of course. And this goes also for Westerners. If anyone in Europe is listening to this, Vienna, where they tried to conquer twice, that the Ottomans stopped. I don't remember who were the two individuals that had the conversation, but basically the Westerners were proud of fending off the Ottomans, and the Ottomans said, you don't understand. We maybe lost this fight. We're going to come back in 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years, and we're going to conquer you from within because Allah favors the patient. So those who are patient or willing to suffer.
So applying this now back to where we are.
Khamenei is a Shiite Muslim. The IRGC, led by the Ayatollahs, who we tend to mix together, are Shiite Muslims. I don't know to speak. There are so many different strands, and we don't really know what's going on within the 90 million Iranians themselves. But they're not Arab. It's a different country. It's a country that was becoming Westernized until the Revolution of '79, and I think Khamenei, with these Muslim principles, to which they adhere, it's a little hard to assume or to plan where he's leading this. We spoke about Waqf and other thing, but Hudaybiyah is.
But do you think? Let me ask you,
yeah.
Rafi, do you think that when he's threatening a U.S. warship, do you think it's a legitimate threat? Meaning, if the U.S. does strike Iran, do you think he's going to go after U.S. assets, which would absolutely end that regime? If he was to sink a battleship, if he was to sink an aircraft carrier, I don't know when an aircraft carrier has ever been sunk, and there's not that many in the whole world, right? The U.S. has maybe 12 aircraft carriers, and it's I think the largest after that's maybe China with 3 or 4. They have very few. That would cause the elimination of the regime for sure.
Right.
Why is he making that statement to Trump right now? What's he saying to Trump?
He's trying to play big stick diplomacy. And Trump has the bigger stick. The United States has the bigger stick. We don't even have to get to nuclear arsenal. It's just the United States military. I think we forget sometimes the might of the United States military. You know who has the most planes in the world?
The U.S.?
The U.S. Air Force. Do you know who is second place in having the most planes in the world? The U.S. Navy. this and the United States is spread all over the world. And when they're mobilizing with these aircraft carriers, people may forget that the U.S. isn't, when the U.S. will respond to anything like that, it won't just be from those aircraft carriers. And Trump has proven that he is a force to be reckoned with, and you probably shouldn't attempt at it. So I do think it would be the end of the regime, and I think this maybe answer the question on Trump's end. I think Khamenei is more of it's a question that no one can answer. But with Trump, I think he's trying to do the same thing he's done in the past, which is exhaust all other attempts. We tried to sit down with them. They wouldn't talk. We tried to bring them again. They wouldn't talk. We tried to come. They won't give up the nuclear deal. They won't give up threatening us. They won't give up threatening. We can't.
So it's interesting when we talk about the Trump handshake doctrine,
right?
Where he's pulling in, applying pressure, and then he knows when to release. I think there's something, he knows when to give the other side the feeling he's releasing. And when Iran right now, you could see that the foreign minister talks are moving forward. In 2 weeks, we'll get back to you with a plan, right? So it looks like on the optics, on the surface, that Trump is okay. Trump's releasing but this is when Trump actually can pull out Midnight Hammer.
I will remind the audience that this is the same question. The question that we're asking right now of what is Trump doing is reminiscent of the question we asked in the weeks leading up to June 12th. And we all thought we were the wiser. We all thought that, I won't speak for everyone. I'll say that many voices were saying that Trump isn't, he's lost his allyship with Israel, and Israel doesn't have on who to depend. And we just don't know where to turn, and we don't know what to expect from Trump. And then, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, I gave them 60 days. Today is 61. So I think there isn't a word for it in English, but davka, especially. It's not really, it doesn't translate right, but that moment where those questions, where Trump starts, his behavior is so irrational, whether he's playing chicken, whether he's playing a red herring, whatever it is, when it doesn't make sense at all, maybe we should patience. He's proven himself time and time and time and time again. Every single time. Again, I don't think he knows what he's going to get at the end of the day. I think he wants to win, and when he feels he's won enough, he lets go. And I think right now, he is pulling the Iranians, he's stretching them far enough that when he feels he has, whether it's the legitimacy within the American legislative, whether it's the American people, whether it's the West, I don't know. When he feels that he's shown, I've exhausted all of their options, then we'll have a day 61 again.
Mm-hmm. My question is, now I want us to narrow down. I'm very curious for your take. What does this mean for Israel? This post-alliance restructuring, what does it mean for Israel? Are we going to be 100% allied with the U.S. at a time in which you and I have talked about this in great detail, and my audience knows that one of the most important things, and for me at the very least, is the recalibration of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And I feel like that is an existential threat. I feel like the only person that can really do this in Israel is Prime Minister Netanyahu. He is the one that is absolutely understands America, is grateful to America, and at the same time understands where Israel needs to be. But at the same time, when you're restructuring reliance on the United States, you also want to have other entities that you can bring into your orbit. What does this mean for Israel and Israel's need to have growing independence?
First is the legitimacy of, I don't want to say globalist, but international kind of orders. The second is the difference between those on the Western side and those opposing the West. The third point is, how does that affect Israel in general? And then I think the last point that you brought it to is, how should we view this detachment from the United States and in a sense of more independence and more of an allyship rather than dependence? So I'll try to,
in light of not having anyone else to turn to.
Right. The fundamental principles of the West that come from our traditions, that come from our religious texts, that come from the experience of thousands of years, that come from everything we've gone through to develop them, things that many take for granted today, are not rational principles. That's why also as Jews, there's a statement that's kind of strange where Moses says, choose the good and the life and not the evil and death. And well, isn't that a rational decision? And I would recommend that people look around us, all the enemy civilizations of the West. No, it's not a rational decision. If it was rational decisions, all human beings
this is the
would come to
playbook.
this conclusion.
This is the playbook.
Exactly.
For them.
So we need to understand that our very special ideas, our very good ideas that make the West so unique, so powerful, are things that we need to defend with force, because there are those who want to take it away, and there are those who don't accept it. There are those who see us as kuffar. There are those who see us as enemies to their dominance of what they call the 100-year marathon in China. There are those who see us as adversaries in any sense. And so these concepts of NATO, of the UN, of the EU, on our side, on the Western side, need to understand that they need to be enforced. These ideas, these concepts that make Western values and enforce them and protect them need to be enforced by force. So I think the bluff isn't that NATO isn't a good idea, isn't that it didn't protect the West from communist overreach or invasion or any other thing that they could do. It is that it needs to be reignited, and they need to understand that they need to take their which is what Trump is saying. You need to enforce peace with strength, not with good wishes, not with utopian diplomacy. That's the first thing. The second thing is with the Brinks, it's kind of like what Tucker Carlson said regarding the fact that they're going to unite and they're going to destroy the West, and they're all going to attack. This is, first of all, an economic
Explain
alliance.
Brinks again.
Brinks is an economic alliance between India, China, I think even Brazil, South Africa. They're different, not South Africa. I don't remember all the members of the Brinks, but it's an economic alliance. They are not going to defend each other in a case of a war. Mm-hmm. They're not friends. They're enemies of an enemy, which, if you go into strategic theory, you could say that maybe that could be used in some point, but it's not worth it for Iran to sacrifice everything they have for Brazil. It's not something it's what Tucker Carlson, again, I mention him because he warned against people like Mark Levine that we're going to send tens of thousands of troops again, and it's going to be Iraq 2.0. The bluff isn't just that we need to understand that you need to enforce the doctrines we believe in on the Western side. It's also to recognize the weakness of the alliances on the opposing side. China, Iran, Russia just proved for the past 2 years that what Osama bin Laden called the state's paper tiger. China copies everything they get. And Iran, again, we proved within a day.
Days.
Within a day, we controlled them for 12 days. Within 12 days, we destroyed Fordo. Those are two very different statements. And it shows that the West still has the power. The West still has, if we just choose to, we have the power.
So the bluff isn't that NATO doesn't have the power. It's that NATO has not been willing to use that power to achieve its goal.
By the way, that's what Marco Rubio just said in the Munich summit. Sorry. In the Munich summit, that he basically said we share a history, a past, a root, and we also share a destiny. But this friendship, this alliance is a competence alliance. This is something that you need to be able to defend yourself, not to depend on me. We have things to defend and we should want to defend them, but it's not that the United States is going to do all the work for the rest of the world. So it's recognizing that countries need to defend themselves, but that there is something to share with other countries in the West, but they have to choose to do it.
Okay. Are you saying, though, you do not think there's going to be a reordering of alliances in the world, or the idea of calling out all these alliances and kind of stripping them bare? The EU, again, their trade power. Trump walked in and realigned most of Europe with trade power. Like you said, NATO sent 8 troops or 13 troops to Greenland. With the erosion or the realignment of all of this, how does this, again, I want to drive home, what is this going to look like for Israel? Is it going to be fully dependent on and only with the U.S., which is a very different prospect, not under Trump and not under a Republican administration, but perhaps under a unfriendly future administration?
Again, those are two questions. The bluff.
All right,
with
take them
the-
down and
yeah, the bluff aspect. We have to separate alliances from, like, the EU isn't just an alliance; it's a union. It's like saying that that the United States, Canada, and Mexico share some kind of inherent relationship, and so they should have one governing body. It's not to say that they're a North American alliance and they should probably defend themselves. Having an alliance isn't like being part of a government structure. And so I do think that globalist things prove themselves wrong. That's why Brexit happened. That's why people need to respect their institutions, and they need to have their relationship with their country and not with some higher body that doesn't have to do with anything. I think that is a bluff. I think that is proving globalism over the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st is proving that it's not something that people adhere to. But alliances between and amongst the West are things that need to be strengthened, but it needs to come from every side. And that leads to Israel. I think one of the conversations, for example, that's happening with the American right regarding Israel, the Groyper movement, the woke right, what they're arguing is that Israel is eating from America's golden table, and it is enjoying the fruits of America's labor with organizations like AIPAC that are funded, and they shape American policy to defend Israel. What they don't understand, and of course they point to the $3.8 billion that we get, that Israel gets from the United States as a credit service. The reason I say that is because it's important to reiterate that the money that Israel gets for the United States is money that goes back into the U.S. economy. That it buys American product, that it has contracts with the United States, that it has to spend the American money within the United States, which not only creates jobs and sells their product, etc., but and then we test their gear, we share intelligence, and we hold American Western interests in a very hostile neighborhood, which is called the Middle East. America and Israel are allies. And Israel, I think both sides, we need to understand that there is something not just utilitarian that we serve, which is American, Israeli, Western dominance in the world, this hegemony, regional or world, and a world stage like the United States. It's that there is something that we share in common. There are values that make us who we are that we need to defend. And that relationship should be held in a way of an alliance and not dependency.
I like what you're saying. It's the realignment of the U.S.-Israel relationship it's not that Israel, that the lack of other, perhaps, strength of other alliances around the world will cause Israel to kind of be stranded. We need to realign the Israel-U.S. relationship beyond utilitarian goals and more into the shared moral values that we share between these two nations. Is this what you're saying?
I'll clarify. I said that there are two aspects that need to be remembered. We can't forget the values that we share with the United States, which make us, which have that sense of relationship that we need to protect. It's more than that. We need to shift our dependency, which is what Bibi spoke about over a span of 10 years. We're supposed to completely be off the American support. I think Israelis who understand the picture that we're having a credit system where we give way more than we're paid for with that $3.8 billion, we should have a fair relationship. We don't need to question every single move we make before we make it because we have strings attached. And the United States should respect that, like Israel respects it with the United States. My point is, like we differentiated before with NATO and the EU, we are allies. We're not dependent on the United States. And it forwards American interest. Israel being able to pursue its interests forwards American interests. And if the relationship turns over the years less from dependent to an allyship where we sell each other the goods that we have and we trade the information that we have and we better each other's tech and we do everything that we're doing now, but that the concept is relationship, not dependency, will strengthen that alliance and will also strengthen Israeli sovereignty in this region, which by default pushes Western values and dominance in the Middle East. And that's the relationship that Israel needs to have with the United States and vice versa.
I want to take us one step further, and with this we're going to wrap, which is let's take this current relationship, which is the best relationship we've seen, again, I think, between certainly an Israeli premier and a United States president, between Bibi and Trump. If Trump releases that handshake and feels he gets a decent deal and walks away, which I've been arguing against, I find it to be, a very low probability that he'll do this. If he walks away with a deal that's better than the Obama deal, meaning
everything's better than the Obama,
everything, that it doesn't take much, but it needs to stop enrichment. It means the key will be their ballistic missile program, which Rubio himself is openly spoken about and acknowledges that this existential, and that they're supposedly not going to grow their proxy regime with Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the ring around Israel. Let's just say that if Trump was to walk away and he was to leave that intact and say, okay, I got to win, which may carry through to the end of his presidency, where does this leave Israel? Trump walks away. If he makes a deal with Iran, and we know that they're going to, and Israeli intelligence shows that they're continuing enriching, sees that they're moving forward with the proxy program, sees that they're still building ballistic missiles, which is conceivable that we would release
we
that.
had that in 1983.
Okay, and so what did we do?
And bombed the facilities
in Iraq.
Correct. Right. Similar threat from someone who we don't know if we're going to be able to attack or not, if we can depend on our allies to do it for us. The scene from The Godfather with that Vito is christening his niece or something, and while he's denouncing Satan, every one of his enemies is taken out while he's having this scene. That is exactly what I was thinking about when Bibi went up to the UN and gave his speech while he gave the green light to go and take out Nasrallah a minute before. It's better to apologize than to ask for permission. We, as much as Westerners who don't live here and don't understand the fact that we wake up to sirens, that we have to think twice, sorry, we have to conceal carry. We have to be prepared for the fact that our mixed cities with our lovely neighbors might turn on us like they did in 2021. They might turn on us like they did in 1929 or 1935 or in 1948 or 1963, 67, 1973. We can't count on our neighbors' lack of ambition. And our lack of ambition won't lead to theirs. So we need to be prepared for our enemies to strike. And that means peace through strength. That means that if we see the threat, we need to attack. And with Iran, I also think the main point for this conversation is the eerie sense of what the heck is Trump doing right now is the same feeling we had in the days leading up to June 12th. And so I don't think that that's going to be the case, that he's going to back off. I think the tens of thousands that were massacred by the Iranian regime is something that he can't ignore. And Trump is the FAFO president. And they FA'd. So they're going to find out, I believe. We don't know the future, but it doesn't make sense that Trump is suddenly going to change everything. If the crazy scenario where Trump does not respond after all of this, Israel needs to do what it's always done best, which is take care of its own.
I want to summarize by saying, if Tehran mistakes that handshake for weakness, most likely they're going to be very, very surprised.
God willing.
God willing. Thank you, Rafi, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to having you back on. And to our audience, this is a deep insight into the events that are shaping the world today. This is happening day by day. There's news happening. I'm sure by our next podcast, the Middle East is going to look a little bit different than it looks right now.
Ari, thank you so much for being here. Please tell me, what are you doing here?
Well, thank you for having me. We're here to celebrate Israel and America and to be part of this great community.
Amazing. So please tell me a little bit about Yeshiva University. What do you do?
We are the flagship Jewish university. We have thousands of students. We are actively promoting Israel. We're the only university in the country that flies the Israeli flag 365 days a year.
Wow.
Singing Hatikva at every event.
Wow.
That is what Yeshiva University does.
And I want to talk with you, first of all, about the rise of anti-Semitism. How do you feel about it right now?
Well, I feel that we have an opportunity, and that if attention is being paid to Jews, we're going to show them what Jews stand for. And that are true values that are a blessing to the world. That's what Yeshiva University is for our students, our undergraduate, our graduate students. That's what we educate them. They go out and are blessings to the world.
And what are we going to do with Mamdani?
We are going to show them what we stand for.
How? You're not afraid?
We're not. We are not. If there's anti-Zionists in the world that are promoting terrible lies about Israel, we need to stand for the truth.
Of
And
course.
I believe that if Yeshiva University is in New York City, there was not a moment then now that we were created. This is our moment. This is our time to stand up and fight for Israel and show what the Torah is about and what the Jewish people are about.
You're not afraid?
We are not. We are not
Your
afraid.
students?
No, thank God. They're doing really well.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
it's absolutely amazing. Now, how was it after October 7th?
October 7th was an important rallying moment. Every student of Yeshiva University was deeply affected. I myself, my son, he's fought over 300 days in Givati. 3 of my sons are Bogrei Tzal. My daughter, Sheirut Lumi. We made Aliyah 17 years ago.
Wow.
I'm the first American-Israeli president of Yeshiva University, and this was obviously very personal and deeply real for all of us. And we responded. We've been praying and actively working for the hostages since the moment that it happened. I had the opportunity to deliver the benediction at President Trump's inauguration, where I was able to front and center praying for Israel and the return of the hostages. I'll tell you one brief moment. At that time, while everybody's head was down, I looked at the president, and the president and I looked at each other, and he nodded to me and signaled that he's got the hostages. I was the first speaker after him. It wasn't just from day one, it was from moment one that the
Wow.
president knew that he was going to make sure the hostages were returned, and President Trump delivered.
Thank God we have President Trump.
I don't think there's a question about that for Israel, for the Jewish people fighting anti-Semitism, the President Trump has been such a positive force for us.
You gave an award to Elise Stefani.
Yes.
Can you please tell me about it a little
Absolutely. Look, part of our mission is to gather the heroes. He said that the Jewish people, Yeshiva University, are blessings to the world. We want to find our partners. So for graduation, we have promoted those heroes in America that have stood for Israel and the Jewish people and true American values. So the year before, we had Senator John Fetterman,
Right.
who was incredible,
He's amazing.
standing up, amazing. And last year,
Who's going to be next year?
we actually have a great.
I have a few names for you.
We have a great person for next year, but I
Who?
can't announce it
No,
yet.
give us
I
the
can't announce it
scoop.
yet. We have a great.
Can I guess? I have 3 names.
I don't know. I won't. But I'm curious what your names are. But I won't
Okay.
tell you. I won't tell you.
Okay. But don't smile.
Okay.
Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Tom Cotton. One of them,
Those are 3 good ones. I'm not going to say a word.
it's
I'm not gonna
Lindsey.
say-
I saw
I'm not
it.
going to say a word. Lindsey actually greeted me. I spoke at the Senate this year.
And
Lindsey spoke to introduce me and greeted me. He's he's a good man. But I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. There's no comment.
maybe invite the president.
Listen, I have no comment right now. No, really.
I have a great scoop here.
I have no comment right now.
No, I'm joking.
But,
what is your
yes.
next goal?
We are building our graduate schools for excellence. So we've actually doubled in size from in our graduate students, which are not just Jewish students, but they come from all countries and all over the world. So they have an opportunity to study in a Zionist university. So let me tell you, we had a
Where
group,
can I sign in?
It's amazing. And they're enormously successful as professionals. So recently we had this group from South Korea. They came to Yeshiva, they wrote me a note, they said, "Dear President Berman, we love Yeshiva, we stand with Israel." That's what's happening. All these students from all countries and all cultures, they come and they see what a blessing the Jewish people are. We welcome them into our
my God,
home
it's
and our
awesome.
hearts, and that's what we're promoting. So we're continuing that. growing our graduate schools. We're just starting an engineering program, which is going to be amazing. We've opened up a new college of science and health. We've really been expanding enormously, and we're seeing great interest from students, from faculty, from donors. People want to support today the flagship Jewish university.
Okay, so usually I ask from people to send a message, mainly to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But now I want to ask you, what message would you like to send? Maybe to Mamdani or President Trump. You can decide, but who do you want to send a
President
message?
Trump, it's thank you. To Mayor Mamdani, it's we will always stand for Israel and for the values that we hold dear. And he should know that we've been here for over 100 years in New York, and we are confident that we will continue to grow and expand and stand strong.
Do you understand Hebrew?
אני עליתי
So,
לפני 17
okay,
שנה, אני בוגר של
so
האוניברסיטה
I'll say
העברית.
the sentence of Tal Brody. You
Yes.
remember?
כן,
אנחנו כאן, ואנחנו על המפה, ואנחנו נישאר על המפה.
absolutely.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for this
Thank you for
interview.
having
Thank
me.
you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect, thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English. Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Deborah Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Here is everything that you need to know. The signs of war are growing, and these are the latest developments of the last hour. Lebanese media is reporting that American officials from the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon have been evacuated from the country. India, whose Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to arrive in Israel next week, has issued evacuation warnings to its citizens in Iran, urging them to leave immediately. In the United States, the Trump administration and its closest circles are heavily signaling escalation. President Donald Trump posted to his Truth Social account this commentary by Jewish analyst Mark Levin on why America should not negotiate with Iran. At the same time, the American conservative journalist Laura Loomer, who is reportedly close with the Trump administration, tweeted this today, that there will be an interesting day. These developments follow a report by Axios this morning where President Trump has reportedly given the Islamic regime an ultimatum. Either present a detailed nuclear proposal within 48 hours or risk the collapse of talks. Should the regime submit a proposal, talks between Iranian and American negotiators will continue in Geneva. But if not, the American armada in the region is poised and ready to strike. Washington is still seeking a zero enrichment policy, although reports are now suggesting that a possible compromise is being discussed, allowing Iran a strictly limited enrichment program for medical purposes only. Iranian official Ali Larijani is expected to present Washington with a proposal in the coming days in what appears to be the last effort to avoid a widespread regional conflict. And meanwhile, inside Tehran, the Islamic regime is preparing for an imminent escalation. Iranian officials are stressing that any American attack would not be limited and will offer a severe blow to the regime. To combat the growing threat, Ayatollah Khamenei has been quietly restructuring the Islamic Republic's capabilities and power in the country and the general region. Larijani, a former IRGC commander, has now been entrusted with much of the country's day-to-day control. Successors for key military and government roles have also been named in the case of an assassination attempt. Larijani has effectively been running the crisis management since January, sidelining President Pezeshkian as Tehran faces anti-regime protests at home and a growing threat of an American attack. And speaking of, internal unrest in Tehran continues as university campuses across Iran are seeing a second day of mass protests and mourning. Demonstrations were reported at 5 universities in Tehran and 1 in Mashhad, with most centered around 40-day memorial services for the thousands that have been killed in last month's brutal crackdown on nationwide unrest. The students were seen openly defying the Islamic Republic, burning the Islamic regime flag in their hijabs, tearing down posters of former IRGC personnel previously eliminated by Israel, and waving the flag of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who was widely supported as Iran's transitional leader. These are images never before seen from Iran prior to the nationwide protests of January, signaling an incredibly weak regime, but an even stronger people of Iran. Moving now to Gaza, the IDF released a video of the demolition of a Hamas terror tunnel in southern Gaza's Rafah area. According to the military, troops of the 7th Brigade, in cooperation with Yahalom combat engineers, eliminated several Hamas terrorists who were operating from within the underground tunnels. Terrorist infrastructure sites were dismantled, including a kilometer-long tunnel containing weapons and hideouts. In a moment of partial closure, troops dismantled the tunnel shaft in which reserve soldier Master Sergeant Effie Feldbaum, who fell on October 28, 2025. In addition, the IDF confirmed the elimination of Hamas operatives who once again violated the ceasefire and crossed the yellow line, posing an immediate threat to troops in the area. Following the identification, the troops eliminated the terrorists swiftly, removing the threat. And finally, an initial report coming out of a thwarted terror attack in northern Israel. According to various unconfirmed reports, Israel's Shin Bet and police thwarted a terror attack in Carmiel, where the targets were soldiers. 4 suspects have been arrested, and the story is developing. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Quickly before we go, I want to encourage you to scan the QR code that's on your screen to get updates on our ILTV WhatsApp channel. But that's all for now. I'm Deva Klein, and thank you so much for joining us on ILTV on the Hour. I'll see you soon.
We saw what happened in the 12-day war. When 500 missiles were fired at Israel, 10% of them penetrated our missile defense systems. Now imagine that's 3 times that number. It's a question, do you wait for that to happen, or do you neutralize the threat preemptively? And I think that preemption today is a word we need to start to get used to.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Record, the show where we go beyond the headlines so that the real stories can come to light. Today, we're covering issues that feel both global and deeply personal, from the high-stakes nuclear negotiations with Iran to the unrest on our own streets, and finally to the unresolved questions surrounding October 7th and the leadership failures that still hang over Israel. I'm Zina Rachamilova. Let's get into it. We begin, of course, with Iran. The second round of negotiations between the United States and the Iranian regime is set to begin tomorrow in Geneva. On the table, at least from the American side, is setting back Iran's nuclear program, halting its ballistic missile production, ending its support for regional terror proxies, and stopping the regime's brutal repression of its own people. Tehran, meanwhile, insists that it will only discuss its nuclear program, nothing more. So not much seems to have changed since the last time we covered this topic. It feels like they've been dead on arrival, and I would hope it means that the Americans and the Israelis are closely in coordination on some bigger plan. On Saturday, the U.S. President Donald Trump warned that it would be a very bad day for the regime if the negotiations were to fail. When asked on whether he supported regime change in Iran, Trump gave what I think was a very politically straightforward answer, which is that it would be the best outcome. Meanwhile, an additional U.S. carrier, the USS General Ford, and its strike group is moving into position, and it could take several weeks for it to reach the Persian Gulf. This is happening while President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed last week that the U.S. would increase economic pressure on Iran, particularly targeting oil sales to China. This matters because more than 80% of Iranian oil exports go to China. If China China reduces its purchases, the economic pressure on Iran would intensify significantly. The hope is that this would push the regime to make further concessions regarding its nuclear program. U.S. officials have said that the maximum pressure campaign will move forward alongside nuclear talks with Iran and the ongoing military buildup in the Middle East in preparation for possible strikes if diplomacy fails. So, we will continue to monitor the negotiations and keep you posted here on ILTV. Now, shifting from Iran to what's happening closer to home on the Israel and Gaza front, the first leaders of the new Board of Peace are set to meet on February 19th in Washington. Israel is now officially on the board, while other countries are still weighing in on whether or not to participate. At the same time, Hamas representatives have returned to Cairo for talks with mediators on a U.S.-backed plan to disarm the terror group. And now I think it's time to zoom in and speak about issues that are even closer to home. So far in Israel, no one has really taken proper accountability of what happened on October 7th. It's been just over 4 months since the return of the living hostages and the so-called unofficial declaration to the end of the war in Gaza, and yet we still have not had a commission of inquiry as to what happened. We do, however, have this 55-page document that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released to the state controller and to the public on February 5th of 2026. The document includes security-sensitive transcripts from senior politicians and leaders in the Shin Bet and Amman. It includes documents regarding Gaza, covering the period from Operation Protective Edge in 2014 up to the very morning of October 7th in 2023. Now, those leaked transcripts are, as an Israeli, really upsetting to read. In them, the security establishment says that their intelligence suggests that Hamas suffers and that they don't see any benefit in conducting any ground offenses. These intelligence reports even go back to February of 2024 and April of 2024, where the security leaders say that there's no reason to believe that Hamas is prepared for a ground invasion or any sort of rapid response of this nature. We should note that this is not the full transcript, but something that Netanyahu himself has cherry-picked. And it's all deeply unsettling. And without a proper commission, I'm not sure how we can move forward from all of this. With us today to make sense of all of this is Yaakov Katz. Yaakov is an American-Israeli journalist, an author, and the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. He's a longtime military and defense correspondent and has covered Israel's security establishment, regional conflicts, and the U.S.-Israel relations for over a decade. Yaakov's most recent book, titled While Israel Slept, goes into detail of everything leading up to the surprise attack on October 7th and the devastating consequences that followed. Yaakov, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Zena.
So, given that you have years of experience covering the long-standing history of Israel's security establishment, I want to ask you what your experiences were on October 7th. Were you shocked? Were you surprised to see the level of devastation and the level of security failure that we saw on that day?
Well, I think 100%, like the rest of the country. I think everyone was surprised by the just great level of what Hamas was capable of doing, how it took Israel completely by surprise, how it had free reign of southern Israel for hours until the Israeli military was able to regain control of the kibbutzim and just the general area. How many people, the scope of how many people were massacred that day, the crimes that were committed against them, the number of just 251 people who were abducted into the Gaza Strip, and things that we never thought would be possible, but also coming from Israel's weakest enemy. And the idea that this could happen, it did a few things. On the one hand, what I think it did for a lot of Israelis, it created a sense of vulnerability that we have yet to fully recover from, even now, 2.5 years almost later. But the second thing that it did was it caused, I think, immediately people to understand that the policies that had been in effect and the national security doctrine that had been prevalent until that point, which basically in one word called for containment and to do pretty much almost everything to postpone and delay and stave off a conflict with Hamas, was broken and was not the right policy. And that's something that thankfully as we speak now, has for the time being changed. Hopefully it will continue to be changed.
So in your most recent book, you talk about all the details that were leading up to the massacre and everything that Israel had missed. Just even hours before Hamas invaded Israel. So can you walk the audience through the sort of bullet points of everything that led to the massacre and everything that we missed?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what we saw definitely in the 24 to 36 hours preceding was that there was a lot of information. There were a lot of alarm bells that were going off, and there was a lot of suspicious activity that was taking place on the Palestinian Hamas-controlled side of the border. There's the famous story of the SIM cards that were replaced Palestinian SIM cards, and in their place were put Israeli SIM cards, and Israel saw this, but didn't know, is this an indication of the fact that maybe an attack is coming? Because then they would want to have communications capability on the other side of the border, or is it just the annual exercise of testing out SIM cards because they had done so pretty much around the same date the year prior? Israel saw throughout the night that they were uncovering rocket launchers underground that would indicate maybe they're planning a rocket attack. They saw them preparing underground bunkers for their top Hamas commanders, but it was really, everything got stuck into this conversation and this debate. And we spoke to a lot of the IDF officers who were on these calls throughout the night, including members of the Shin Bet, the Israel Security Agency. The debate was pretty much, we assume that Hamas does not want war. That was the prevalent theory and the intelligence assessment at the time. Hamas doesn't want war. They're scared of war. They want economic prosperity. They want to have more money allowed into Gaza. They want more workers allowed into Israel to bring money into Gaza. Why would they want a war? And therefore, this probably is a drill. And if it's not a drill, then at the very most, it's a small-scale incursion, which we'll be able to deal with the number of people that we have along the border, and our intelligence will give us the heads up if something, even God forbid, is to happen. That was a complete breakdown of everything. So the what we would call the misconceptia, just the idea, this paradigm or this theory that Hamas was deterred and did not want war, proven wrong. The idea that it was something small, proven wrong. The idea that it was a drill, proven wrong. The idea that the soldiers along the border would contain it, proven wrong. So you had a lot of these alarm bells. And I think that really at the core, Zina, is maybe a conclusion that we need to come to as a country. That is, when you have a genocidal terrorist jihadist organization on your border that's calling for your destruction, you should pretty much take it seriously, right? It's not until that point on October 7th, the calculations were more political and diplomatic and economic for that matter. And can we use carrots and other levers to potentially deal with this threat as opposed to war? But sadly, if we don't deal with it in a kinetic way, it will come to our borders and it will invade our communities. And I think that's the very painful lesson from October 7th, because what it essentially does mean, if you really drill down and think about it, is that we're stuck in a very vicious cycle of conflict, because the enemy's not disappearing. We know that Hamas is still in control of about half of Gaza. Hezbollah is still in Lebanon with very significant capabilities. Of course, Iran, as we speak, is the standoff with them continues. But it just means that the painful conclusion is that Israel is going to have to fight still for years to come. And that's hard to digest and accept.
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges to really understand what Israel should have done better is taking a calculated risk like that just based on the intelligence alone means that you're going to be risking the lives of, at least 500 soldiers. And I think maybe even you've said in the past that, we know that Hezbollah, for example, is planning and hopes to plan very similar style attacks of October 7th. And we need to really assess, how credible is the threat? How does everything collectively indicate that we should be risking the lives of so many soldiers in order to act on something that's very, very serious? And I want to understand where you think the balance of that is, not not looking at every single thing that a terrorist is saying. You're right. When terrorists are claiming that they want to genocide you, we have to take that seriously. But terrorists also lie. So where is the sort of fine line with it all?
No, you ask a very important and very tough question to answer because it's not scientific. It's not something that I could say, well, when this happens, this has to be the response. There's always going to be a multitude of considerations and criteria that you have to keep in mind. Are you prepared for war? Do you have resilience? Do you have the ammunition? Do you have the missile defense capability? Is your military, is it not facing and suffering from battle fatigue? And I mean, there's so many elements here. Your economic capability, the international legitimacy, your allies around the world. You really have a lot of considerations. With that said, though, as you were speaking, I was thinking back to 2014, when during Operation what was known then as Protective Edge, about a 50-day war between Israel and Hamas. At the time, there were people within the security cabinet that was also, then the prime minister was also Benjamin Netanyahu, who were pushing Netanyahu to launch a ground incursion into Gaza. And for most of that war, it was from the air. And then eventually Hamas started popping out of tunnels, and Netanyahu acquiesced and agreed to a very limited incursion into Gaza just to deal with the cross-border tunnels that were very close to the border. But when this whole thing came up of an operation, the argument that he had, which then was illustrated by a leak of a military document to one of the TV stations during the war, saying that according to IDF assessments, 500 soldiers would be killed in this war, and that was something that the Israeli public did not support. Right? No one wants anyone to die, and definitely not such a number. But look at the numbers now. Right? I mean, 1,200 people massacred on a single day because we failed. Right? Hundreds of soldiers killed in the war that came because Hamas was so much more powerful. I mean, so again, what would have been in 2014 had we tried to destroy Hamas? You could always say would have, could have, should have. Obviously, it's easy now to look back. But I think that the general lesson is we can't allow these enemies to amass and obtain even conventional military capabilities. You see, if you look throughout Israeli military history, for the most part, except for maybe one exception, Israel never launched a preemptive war. It never went to war over conventional military buildup because our enemies were amassing weapons. We attacked Iraq's nuclear reactor. We attacked Syria's nuclear reactor. Nuclear was always in its own realm. But we never attacked Syria because they were amassing ballistic missiles or chemical weapons. The one exception could be the Six-Day War, although that's a historical argument in of itself. But what we saw on October 7th makes me think that we cannot even allow enemies to amass capabilities that will be used against us. And you hear this conversation, Zina, taking place now, everything that has to do with Iran. Israel looks at Iran on three levels. Nuclear, obviously, up here. But their development and production of ballistic missiles has us almost just as concerned about the nuclear weapons, because we saw what happened in the 12-day war. When 500 missiles were fired at Israel, 10% of them penetrated our missile defense systems. And look at how much damage and how many casualties they were able to cause. Now imagine that's 3 times that number. It's not 50. It's not 50. It's 150 or it's 200 that get through. They fire 2,000. I mean, and that's not a far away idea. So we really, it's a question, do you wait for that to happen or do you neutralize the threat preemptively? And I think that preemption today is a word we need to start to get used to, because that has to become part of our story now.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I'm hopeful that with Iran, at the very least, that Israel is making the right moves that it needs in order to, at the very least, prevent it from building up its ballistic missile program. I want to go back to October 7th and ask you one question that always pops up when people ask me outside of the Jewish pro-Israel community, often in the journalism community. When I speak to a bunch of journalists that come to Israel, their biggest question is, how could it have taken the IDF so long to show up? What kind of, some people go off to even imply that there was a stand-down order because Israel has such a strong, sophisticated army that, okay, even a surprise attack like what Hamas did on October 7th, at the very least, the military should have gotten there within hours. So is there anything you can shed light on that for us?
What I can, first of all, the stand down order is part of the idea of this conspiracy theory that exists. So I'll split my answer, if you'll allow me, into two different categories. Category number one is just on a general perspective. I've come to, because I get asked this question also quite often, is that when you have a crisis of faith, and that's what happened on October 7th, because there was a genuine belief that the Israeli military is so powerful and so capable, and it completely failed in such a terrible way that shakes your core belief in your military. And what that leads to then is you can't explain it rationally. So you go to a conspiracy theory. There was a stand down order. There was a mole in the inside. Somebody pressed a button. Someone shut off a system. You go there because rationally it's hard to explain these things. If we imagine belief in God, when something good happens, you say it's because of God. When something bad happens, you say it's God punishing me. There's a similar way to look at this too. These are belief systems, and when they crumble, you have to somehow rationalize it. So that's where conspiracy theories come from. I completely dismiss them because they're unfounded. There's no evidence of them. And I don't think they're true, as somebody who has investigated this and spent countless hours, but also not just me. No one else has found any evidence of it. What unfortunately happened, now to the specifics, this was, like we said before, Zina, this was a complete, utter breakdown of everything. Now let's remember what happened. Hamas's attack was extremely sophisticated, if low-tech in nature, but sophisticated in the execution. What do I mean by that? They had studied the IDF deployment on the border. They had studied the IDF positions. They knew what to attack. They knew how to neutralize the communications and the sensors on the border. And they knew how to bog down right away the forces that were deployed along the border. So when they attacked at 6:29 in the morning, when the attack commenced on that Saturday, and they went to the borderline positions, what they were able to do was to bog down the soldiers who are then supposed to deploy to the kibbutzim. They weren't able to because they were fighting within their own bases, right? They got to the division headquarters, so the commander of the division, who's supposed to be able to relay to the Southern Command headquarters that are in Beersheba. The division is in Re'im, not far from the border. And he's supposed to then lead, this is Brigadier General Rosenfeld, lead the forces to defend and fight off. He's bogged down. He can't leave his own situation room because there are terrorists who are rampaging through his own base. So then you have no eyes, no ears, no real communications, no forces that are there to be able to immediately go in. Then you have another situation that's happening at the same time. Is this just the beginning of an attack, or is there another attack coming from the north? Or is this the only attack? And at that point, no one knew, right? So if you now send the entire IDF, you say to everyone, just get down there. Are you leaving the north vulnerable for an attack that will be 10 times in the size and the scope and the capabilities of what Hezbollah is able to do? You need a moment to figure that out. I'm not trying to excuse the decisions that were made. I'm trying to explain them. The government needed to understand what was happening before it could make these decisions. So you have these two situations. You have to gather and understand what's happening in the north, see if something's happening or not. I mean, I can tell you just the other day, I was talking with an intelligence officer who was in the room on October 7th, whose job was Hezbollah. He was the intelligence officer responsible for Hezbollah. He at a couple hours in felt confident enough to go to the chief of staff and to the defense minister and say, I can confidently say that Hezbollah will not be attacking right now from the ground, right? But you need that information. So what we did see, though, we saw some units being sent down. We saw people just grabbing a gun and going down. It took a while for the military to be able to mobilize. But here's the other big issue that the Air Force has had to learn lessons from. And this is a real legitimate question. Okay, we get it that it takes time to send a Golani or an infantry brigade or a battalion. Why couldn't you take 2 Apache longbow attack helicopters, throw them up on the border? They have the rapid fire cannon under their fuselage, under the belly of the helicopter, and just anyone coming across the border mow down. I mean, why couldn't we do that?
Wasn't there a concern about hurting hostages?
There were concerns about hurting hostages, but this was I'm talking even before they grabbed the hostages. And I think that the issue here was that, and again, this is something that the military has changed. If you saw just a week or two ago, the IDF announced it is purchasing a whole new batch of attack helicopters. It's changing the whole way it uses the attack helicopters. The Air Force was not functioning as an entity that knows how to operate when it comes to ground attacks on its own. It needs someone there to tell them, attack here, attack there. This is the enemy. It doesn't know how to function in that way. Now you could say, well, adapt. Right. They should have adapted. I mean, so again, there were all these mistakes that were happening. And the way I look at it, it is tragically the perfect storm of everything that could have gone wrong. I mean, we could fast forward and keep going into how the people of Kfar Aza and Kibbutz Be'eri are fighting for their lives. They're holed up inside their homes. And when they finally are evacuated, they see there's hundreds of soldiers standing at the kibbutz gate and they didn't go inside. Why did they not go inside? And, I mean, something was very broken that day in the entire chain of command, in the entire functioning of the military. And this is something that the IDF has really spent a lot of the last 2 years studying, learning, reforming, implementing. But, you know, it's really the great tragedy that it is.
It really is. And, you know, on that note, I know that the IDF has conducted its own sort of internal inquiry on everything that they did wrong, and that was published a while back, I believe. But it has been, you know, the unofficial end of the war, according to President Donald Trump, even though Hamas has not yet disarmed. And we ourselves in Israel have not had an official state commission of inquiry. I want to ask you, why do you think that is?
That's politics, Zena, unfortunately. We need, in my view, it is existential to have a state commission of inquiry, to be able to learn the lessons of what went wrong, to implement them, to study them. Mostly, I think that, yes, accountability is super important. I believe that our culture of accountability in our country is rotten. But I put that aside because even what's more important for me is to learn what went wrong, to make the reforms and implement the lessons so that this doesn't happen again, because it will happen again. I mean, we will be caught by surprise. There will always be strategic surprises. And we need to have in place safeguards and protection and processes in the relationship between the political echelon and the defense establishment and our intelligence agencies. So to prevent these things from happening, and if they do happen, for those safeguards to kick in. The prime minister is refusing to establish a state commission of inquiry and using excuses of the Supreme Court, because under Israeli law, when you establish a state commission of inquiry, which is what we had, for example, after the Yom Kippur War of 1973, it's what we had after the Meron disaster, when 40-something Jews were trampled in the worst civilian disaster in our country's history. It's what you have when you have great failures, what you had after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin back in 1995. The prime minister is saying, I can't do this because the Supreme Court is biased, it's left-wing, it's against me, it just wants to topple a right-wing government. That narrative has taken hold within his camp and within his support base. And he's using that, though, as an excuse, in my opinion, because he does not want to establish a commission of inquiry, because I think he knows what it will discover. And it will discover, by the way, does make sense, is that the person who's been prime minister pretty much uninterrupted since 2009, right, is the person who set the policy, is the person who dictated what the approach should be towards the Gaza Strip, and he is responsible overall. He doesn't want to be held responsible. He wants to remain in office. He wants to continue to run in the next election. And as a result, he's preventing the establishment of an inquiry that